Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Naruto has amaterasu flame in fairy tale. Before I start, please support for more amazing content, and do consider subscribing to my channel and share this video with your friends. This is written by Jiraiya's dream and link in description and support writer. Let's start the video. Prologue. Rechecking the complex seals a 40th time, the man pursed his lips as he steeled his fluttering heart. Once upon a time, he would have just activated the Fuin array and winged it. That segment of his life had passed rather quickly. Now paranoia ruled his world as he peered cautiously at the massive array that spanned the entire floor of the basement he stood in, making sure not even a single stroke was overly thick or thin. Drawn in his own blood, the Fuin was one of the most complicated ever designed. Even the lost Uzumaki Fuin Jutsu couldn't hold a candle to what he had painstakingly formulated over the past year. Hiding in dark, dank basements lit only by flickering candlelight would not have crossed his mind a year ago. As it were, the whole guerrilla shtick became necessity when Uchiha Madara managed to activate his Eye of the Moon plan. Everyone but he and Karabi succumbed to the Mugen Tsukuyami that was cast. The rapping Kumonin only grinned at him disarmingly as he held off Madara for what scant time he could, to allow for his fellow Jinchuriki to escape and counter the sinister plan. Even the use of Kyuubi's chakra was ineffectual. All it did was make the ninjas sick from chakra poisoning. With even the most crude of dispelling techniques useless in the face of Mugen Tsukuyami, he figured a return to his familial roots might provide him the answer. Hence he journeyed across the lands in secrecy, using all his hard-earned abilities to avoid detection. He was genuinely surprised the masked man had not been able to track him down, but that surprise quickly evaporated as he realized just how much time he would need to create a counter. Since then, a healthy dose of paranoia and the most painful of chakra suppression seals have kept him from being found. However, it was barely a meaningful existence, with the whole world succumbing to a mindless fate. He found nothing. There was no seal, no technique that could release the Mugen Tsukuyami. Instead of letting despair overwhelm his increasingly fragile heart, he gained inspiration from the various male figures of his life. The greatest practitioner of Jikukanjutsu, according to Jiraiya, was lost to the world when the Nidaime Hokage sacrificed himself to protect the lives of his team from the Kinkaku Butai, but the concepts were still explored after the great man's death, and works like Hiraishin no Jutsu were created and used to devastating effect. Kuchio's no Jutsu and Kamiri were also paragons of the fabled and exceedingly difficult art, but he was willing to try, even at the cost of his life. He was the last one standing anyway. If he didn't do it, no one could. With the idea to twist spacetime to his whim and fancy, he settled down in a small village, where he hollowed out a place for his work underneath an abandoned straw cottage. Seals plastered the cottage above ground, preventing his enemy from discovering his location or worse, utilize his work for even more nefarious purposes. Half a year of head-scratching later, he had a design that he was confident in. Even Kurama expressed his admiration for the sheer complexity of the Fuin, and was fully confident in his partner's array. Time travel was merely an intriguing theoretical study for many Fuinjutsu experts until he found the dire need for such a crazy Fuin to work to specification. Sure, manipulation of spacetime was almost commonplace, but to take a step backwards in time was deemed a pipe dream for even the most confident and skilled of Fuinjutsu masters. No one even had the bravery to create one, in fear of completely annihilating all life in the world. It was a distinct possibility that he tried to push to the back of his mind. No need the added stress of actually killing everyone in the midst of attempting to rescue them. Kyuubi helpfully reminded him of time paradoxes too, but given that nobody had actually jumped back in time before, he reckoned he could deal with the consequences when the array actually brought him to where he wanted to go. Hesitating for the better part of a month, he had finally summoned the courage that he once possessed with abundance. He rationalized his fears by gathering equipment for the journey. As a man who didn't belong to that particular time, or parallel dimension, which was another realistic possibility he tried very hard to ignore, he would need weapons, clothes, and food to sustain himself without having to interact with anyone. There was no telling what sort of changes would happen if he spoke to even one person. The butterfly effect was often derided as a slippery slope fallacy by the scant few philosophers they had, but he knew better than to tempt fate. Glancing one last time at his massive seal array, he swallowed nervously. Clasping his hands in a Hitsuji seal, his body was cloaked in a dense cloak of azure chakra. He would be lucky if he had a minute to activate his seal and avoid capture by Madara, which would finally seal the fate of the world. Even the multiple layers of seals he planted on the cottage would not be enough to mask the voluminous energy he was putting out. Without a sound, the chakra started to flow into the crimson array beneath his feet, the seal lighting up in a bright sapphire glow. The light engulfed his lanky form, and bit by bit, his body dissolved into brilliant particles that shimmered in the blinding glow of the Fuin. By the time Uchiha Madara arrived at the small cottage and eradicated the straw hut with all the impunity of a tantrum-throwing 6-year-old child denied his toys, Uzumaki Naruto was nowhere to be found. 8. His eyelids flew open to an unfamiliar ceiling. He hadn't felt the soft comfort of a mattress or the gentle warmth of a blanket for months. Casting his sharp gaze around, he quietly analyzed his surroundings. The cozy home was built into what seemed to be the hollow of a massive tree. The walls were covered in green bark that pulsed with abundant life. Shelves of tomes were scattered around the place, along with a simple table that stood to a side, holding a pretty porcelain tea set on its top. A particularly large window that stretched from floor to ceiling was beside the bed, ensconcing the room with the sun's warmth. The view, however beautiful, held no interest to him at the moment. But even the radiance of the sun was not able to elicit a smile from the emotionally and physically drained shinobi, far too jaded to appreciate the glow of the sun despite his lengthy disassociation from it. Struggling into a sitting position, he winced as he opened some fresh stitches. Crimson bloomed on the swathes of bandages that wrapped around his torso, arms, and legs. Chalking it up to the stress of the travel, he spied his clothes and belongings sitting on several wooden barrels behind the head of the bed, completely unscathed. There was a certain wave of relief that swept his body then, but it was immediately replaced by concern. Would the person who brought him there be instrumental in the world? Would his presence twist the fates into something unfathomable? Would he be able to rescue his loved ones? Shutting his eyes, he stilled his body as he crossed his legs into a meditative pose. Diving into his mind, he stifled a gasp as he was met with a blank, white space. There was nothing. It was reminiscent of the part of his mind Namake's Minato brought him to when he helped subdue Kurama. Slipping out of his meditation, he cringed at the pain that blossomed from moving his hands together. Clapping them in a hand seal, he stimulated his chakra coils, looking desperately. A modicum of chakra remained in his reserves, most of it spent on the seal, but there was no taint to be found, no foreign chakra to be discovered. With no regard for his health, he ripped the bandages around his abdomen off. Even as he molded the pitiful amount of chakra he currently held, he should see a large spiral seal array materialize on his skin. There was none. A single tear coalesced in the corner of his brilliant blue orbs as he pondered the ramifications of that revelation. He no longer held Kurama. For a moment, he wondered if the Biju missed him as much as he missed the fox. Laughing bitterly, he desperately hoped the reason for the disappearance of Kyubi from his stomach was due to some time paradox. Gingerly lowering his bandaged feet to the carpet that covered the center of the room, he wriggled his toes against the soft curls of the rug, feeling far more at home than he ever did back in Konoha, when things were still simple. Standing in spite of his severe injuries would usually garner much anger and exasperation from the medical staff in the hospital, but he always did it anyway. There was to be no exception here. He needed to know where he was. Grasping the stiff support of the bed to steady himself, he inched his way towards the ornate door. Elegant curves were carved as part of the design of the wooden entrance, but Naruto had no interest in architecture, and couldn't tell which country that pattern would belong to. Every step was a mountain to climb. He never felt more grateful for Kurama's grudging assistance in the past until then. Stumbling on the edge of the carpet, he still managed to clutch the door handle in his haste. His knees hit the ground with a loud crunch, but the pain barely registered as the man pulled himself up with what he would call determination and what most would call sheer stupidity. The door opened easily, and in his rush to see his current locale, he nearly stumbled down the steps that led to the house. The beauty of the landscape went unappreciated for the moment, as Naruto collapsed to his knees once more. A strangled sob made its way out of his throat, as he clutched his face in sorrow. The hot, unbidden tears leaked from between his calloused fingers as they hit his lap with soft plops, soaking the bloodied wraps with even more liquid. Naruto knew most terrains by heart. He studied extensively, in order to be able to recognize his surroundings when he finally pulled off his time travel technique. In order to live off the land until he could bring Uchiha Obito down somehow, he knew the flora and fauna of the elemental countries by heart, and if his friends had been alive, they would be thoroughly amazed by the knowledge he gathered so meticulously. He couldn't recognize any of it. He had failed. Chapter 1, Fairy Tale, Act 774. There was a certain sense of familiarity when he next opened his cerulean orbs. A stern frown on a wrinkled, elderly face greeted him. The woman had pink tresses that were secured in a bun by large pins with moon-shaped ends, which evoked dear memories of his first love, Hareno Sakura. Her wine-red eyes, so similar to Yuhi Kurina's, served as another reminder of his failure. From his angle on the bed, he could only see the high collar of her crimson cloak, decorated by protuberances that resembled horns. Under the cloak, a white-collared green shirt was tied shut by a black tie. His eyes were then drawn to her thin lips as she spoke. To his eternal surprise, he could understand the language despite the variances in dialect. A silver lining to a cloud I wish never existed, Naruto thought morosely, as the woman ragged at him. You fool! You only just survived by the skin of your teeth. If I hadn't found you, you'll be dead or eaten by the wild animals in this forest. Don't do something as stupid as getting out of that bed, you hear me? The blonde man chuckled in nostalgia. She sounds so much like Sakura-chan it's uncanny. Thank you? The woman looked taken aback by the sudden expression of gratitude. She leaned back from her looming position above Naruto's head, huffing. Whatever. Just don't do something stupid again. Where am I? Naruto coughed, swiveling his neck to look at the pink-haired healer who no doubt patched him up. Rather professionally too. You're in the east forest of Magnolia town. The woman rolled her crimson eyes. You don't even know where you collapsed with those injuries? Are you even stupider than you look? You're lucky this forest holds little danger. Were you in some fight? No, Naruto replied softly. I suppose there's no harm in revealing everything. I need all the help I can get now anyway. I'm not from this place. I can tell, the woman scoffed derisively. You don't look local, that's for sure. Naruto chuckled once more, nostalgia filling him. He had not had any human interaction for so long. It felt good to be having any form of conversation, even if all the words were barbed. A rasping cough escaped his mouth at that moment, leaving the old healer to fuss over him in her own, aggravating way. I meant I'm not from this dimension is the most likely probability, I think. The woman gasped involuntarily, and the blond man fixed his steely gaze on the pink-haired healer. She was quick to gather her thoughts and fix a scowl upon her aged face, but it was not going to fool a trained ninja of Naruto's caliber. It might have escaped notice had Naruto been the young and brash child he was many years ago, but he was now far too skilled, too world-weary to be deceived by that. You know something about dimensional travel? How I can return home? A guilty look crossed her face at that moment, as she no doubt struggled to decide on her next words. Then she shook her head, sighing to herself. Yes, I too, am not from this dimension. I came from a parallel dimension called Idolas, a long time ago. Are you from Idolas as well? The spiky-haired man squeezed his eyes shut, a soft breath escaping his lips. The disappointment and resignation couldn't be clearer in his tired, hoarse voice. No, I don't think so. Did they have ninjas in Idolas? The elemental countries? Kana Hagakur? I'm sorry, she mumbled apologetically, understanding his plight far better than most would. Where did you mean to go? Naruto smiled bitterly as he glanced at the perceptive woman. Through time. Her crimson eyes widened at the implications of Naruto's answer, before she patted the man on the shoulder as gently as she could manage without sending lances of pain shooting through his body. Her eyes were full of sympathy, and even the seemingly standard disgust in her tone was missing. Make a new life here. It's peaceful enough, even if there are plenty of rowdy people I know who enjoy fighting too much. I failed everyone, Naruto whispered contritely, almost too quietly for the elderly woman to hear. I'm not sure I deserve a new life when everyone else lost theirs. They don't deserve you if they think that way, the woman growled fiercely, almost maternally. You tried your best. You nearly died in the process. There's nothing else to say. Once you're healed, I'm sending you to an old friend of mine. He runs a guild in Magnolia town. You'll be able to find employment and settle down there. May I know your name? Naruto grinned weakly, his crumbling will to survive bolstered by the finality of her exclamation. I am Naruto. Poorly Yusuka, she answered promptly, before pushing his forehead down gently. Now go back to sleep. Yes, ma'am. 888888888888888. Poorly Yusuka was rather exasperated when she found the unconscious man right in the middle of her herb shrubs. The blood that coated his body told her that he was probably some idiot who got into a fight and lost miserably, until she saw the extent of his severe injuries. A quick diagnostic told her of internal injuries that ought to have killed a man outright, instead of leaving him barely alive. The lacerations that littered his body were not consistent with weapons or magic, and it was rude to assume he was a ruffian before he could even plead his case. Curiously, all his items, including his clothes, were completely intact. That lent credence to the idea that he had not just stumbled out of a fight, and was injured for other reasons. Treating him, even with her considerable knowledge and power, was near impossible. She focused on the internal organs that were practically liquefied first. The cuts would have to heal on their own for the time being. Given his general state of health when she found him, she was rather surprised by how fast he healed, and how strong his constitution was. It was far from normal. Even the high-level mages that she knew, all of them built like tanks due to the use of magic, could not compare with his rate of recovery. Going out to gather more herbs, she returned to see him kneeling at her open front door, unconscious. As she dragged the man into her house once more, she noticed the tear tracks that ran down his face. She reckoned he must have realized something terrible, hence the crying. What she definitely didn't expect was for him to be a self-inflicted hero on some crusade to save his world by jumping through time, and ended up jumping through space instead, landing in their dimension. She knew enough about dimensional travel to understand that he would never get home, not without a way to mark his destination. He seemed to know as much the moment she mentioned Idolas, her true origins. So used to noisy, obstinate, never say die members of fairy tale, she was rather shocked to hear the defeatist words that tumbled out of his mouth. She didn't know what sort of calamity had befallen his world, but for him to resort to something as risky as time travel, which she firmly believed was impossible, it must have been quite the disaster. He had been tight-lipped about his past, but she didn't think to pry anymore. She didn't like anyone digging into her history herself. Might as well let sleeping dogs lie. As the man recovered in mere days, he could be found sitting outside her home, on the soft grass. He seemed at home with nature, completely still in his meditative pose. Poorly Yusuka, while not as great a censor as her former teammate Makarov Dreyer, was far from incompetent. The golden-haired man was gathering magic at alarming rates. It didn't seem to affect any of the flora and fauna around him, in spite of the drain he must have put on his surroundings. Birds flocked to him, and insects respectfully circled his motionless form. Even deer, usually reticent around humans, visited the man during one of his meditation sessions. When he snapped his eyes open, she was startled to find that he had red markings around his eyes, and his pupils had morphed into what resembled a frog's eyes. He corrected her, they were toad eyes, and it was a part of his sage training. She hadn't pegged a young man like him to be a sage of all things. Usually people who called themselves sages were old crones like herself and Makarov. He informed her that the magic he had gathered was mixed with the chakra that he produced naturally within his own body, to form an even stronger energy that boosted his body to superhuman levels. Poorly Yusuke wondered if the chakra pathways he spoke of were a parallel to second origin. It certainly seemed that way, given the amount of magic he had gathered just to mix with his own body's energies. And that was only 1/3 of the total amount of energy he could store in his body. He had tried some of his ninja techniques, as he called them. The one that supposedly summoned creatures didn't work even though it utilized space-time concepts. The azure-eyed man was pretty downtrodden by the failure of that one. The rest of them seemed to work fine. He had a huge array of abilities that even poorly Yusuke had to admit was impressive for a callow teen of his age. He mentioned that he had plenty more up his sleeves, but they were too destructive to try. The pink-haired healer was glad that at least he seemed to care for the environment. She helped him along with his understanding of Earthland, explaining to him the magic that mages utilize for their various skills, the systems they had in place, and the societal customs they adhered to, amongst other things. He absorbed the information readily, and did not seem too bothered by the idea of monsters and dragons. He claimed to have never heard of such creatures existing in his world, and was more curious than afraid of the beasts that she mentioned. He was rather open-minded, though she supposed for someone to believe in time travel, one would have to be quite willing to accept that the rules of nature could be bent. What were dragons anyway, when he could actually say he warped spacetime in order to accomplish instantaneous movement? During one of his meditation sessions, a small red fox came by, seemingly attracted by the rapport her patient was demonstrating with local animals. The canine snuggled into the teen's lap without a sound, and dozed off instantly. When the blonde slipped out of meditation, he seemed rather pensive about gaining a new companion. Nostalgia crossed his face as he stroked the soft crimson fur of the fox, which only nuzzled further into the warmth of his lap. Poorly Yusuke briefly wondered if he had a fox for a companion previously, before shoving the unnecessary musing out of her mind. He seemed pleased enough with the fox anyway, which was all poorly Yusuke needed to gruffly tell him that he ought to keep it with him. Sometimes, pets were good for psychological healing, even if they reminded him of his past. Naruto absent-mindedly stroked the deep crimson fur of the fox he named Kurama, after the Biju who was his only friend and ally left before he voluntarily tore himself from his own dimension. He briefly wondered how the original Kurama was doing, wherever he had landed. There had been no known records of attempts of time travel they could find. He didn't even consider what would happen to the demon in his gut when he activated the seal array. It was a very easy assumption to make. Kurama would just end up following him through the time stream. His presence might even act as an anchor, to ensure they didn't jump into some other dimension because of messed up space-time coordinates. After all, the Biju was intrinsically tied to the planet they lived upon. Given that he ended up alone in Earthland, Kurama must have been left behind in their home dimension. At least, that was the conjecture that Naruto came to and wanted desperately to believe. There were no links back to the elemental countries, and since Kuchio's no jutsu didn't work, it meant that the gap between the two dimensions was too great to breach with his chakra and the space-time technique. As a result, there was no way to check back on the status of his homeland, and no way for him to return to give his failed rescue attempt a second try. It was a very sobering thought. He prayed Madara did not capture Kurama any time soon. Even if the world had succumbed to the madman's schemes, the strength of Mugen Tsukuyomi was waning, albeit very slowly. The desperation of Naruto's gambit was due to his lack of knowledge on the time span for the weakening illusion. It could last for decades for all Naruto knew. There was no guarantee he would be alive and able to defeat the technique by the time it had deteriorated enough for Naruto to do something about it. It was the main reason why Kurama, and him by extension, were still being actively hunted by the ancient Uchiha. He needed the true Kyuubi's chakra to ensure that Mugen Tsukuyomi would last for eternity. Kinkaku and Ginkaku's modicum of Biju chakra just didn't cut it as Kyuubi stand-ins. It was the most depressed he had ever been in his short life. Usually, any upset about his situation was overridden by his optimism and strength of will. He fought, and never gave up. That was his nindo. But for him to work so hard in the most difficult of conditions, and end up abandoning everyone to their doomed fates inadvertently, it was the straw that broke the camel's back. He had lost all will to fight. There was nothing left for him, and nothing he could do for his loved ones. In his career, there was always a villain to beat up, a target to aim for, a mission to accomplish. Now, he was left bereft of his dreams, his goals, his ambitions. He was no better than Haku on the bridge that fateful day. He despised the Hayaton user the moment he had given up on life, and he was the very same kind of person now. He considered ending it all as well. There were no ties left for him to sever. No one in Earthland would miss him, but the thought of poorly Yusuke spending her time and energies healing him back to fitness made him reconsider. He put himself in her shoes, and realized how infuriated she would be if he just wasted all of her efforts by slitting his throat. He could just wait for the end of his days, meandering about without a purpose. Survival would be a cinch in a world without war. It just wouldn't be meaningful when he didn't have anything to live for. The guilds that the pink-haired healer spoke of with such exasperated fondness seemed intriguing, but Naruto was not too interested. While the idea of having an entire surrogate family working, Laughing and growing together was somewhat tantalizing. Naruto was not sure he ought to join such a group. He was an outsider, with little knowledge of their ways and customs. He was a killer while the legal guilds abhorred even the least dirty of jobs. As a ninja, he wouldn't fit, and joining a guild, finding his own patch of happiness, it felt like he was betraying everyone back in the elemental countries. Instead of saving them, or even dying in one last glorious battle with Uchiha Madara, he opted to jump into a peaceful world and enjoy the rest of his days. Shaking his head to clear his morbid thoughts, he focused on the curious issue of magic. As poorly Yusuke gruffly explained to him, it was the spirit of nature and the spirit of the soul combining to form magical power. Ether nano in the air was absorbed subconsciously into a magic container within each mage. It sounded awfully like chakra that was just floating all around them. Meditation brought him closer to nature, and he realized that the energy named ether nano was more like natural energy than chakra, even if they had their nuances. When he successfully merged that with his own abundant well of chakra, he found it to be somewhat lacking compared to natural energy. He supposed it was due to the density of the energy. Ether nano was less concentrated than natural energy. He also found out he could gather ether nano while moving, another property that differed from natural energy. He didn't need to concentrate so much to mix sage chakra given that ether nano was less dense than natural energy, and it was far easier without the possibility of turning into a toad. His chakra, being both an Uzumaki and the Kyubi Jinchuriki for the better part of 16 years, was exceedingly strong and dense. Poorly Yusuke theorized that his chakra was the equivalent of second origin within mages, a separate part of the magic container each person possessed. It was difficult to access for all but the strongest of mages, and provided a great boost in power when opened up. It still used ether nano, but for the pink-haired healer, any similarity would soothe her unease. Naruto had a superhuman constitution, with an anatomy that had enough differences with earthland mages to be classified as a humanoid alien already. Poorly Yusuke claimed she hated humans, but she definitely hated the unknown even more. Being distantly related to the Senju, his chakra leaned heavily towards yang. Coupled with the Kyubi's yang chakra sealed within him, he was effectively nature's fertilizer. Even as he sucked up ether nano to enter Senin Moto, he was encouraging the growth of wildlife with the enriching chakra he was exuding from his pores. Kurama came to his side due to his integration with nature through senjutsu, and given he stuck around for nearly a month, the fox had passively absorbed plenty of yang chakra. He was not very surprised by the first words that tumbled out of the crimson fox's mouth. He had seen more than enough of talking animals in his lifetime. He was, however, shocked when it managed to gather ether nano until it was overflowing into a visible aura. He resolved to teach the little critter some tricks in the future. Training was kept to just replicating his entire jutsu repertoire. He didn't want to risk destroying the beautiful habitat where poorly Yusuke had made her home in. Naruto expected she would be fairly cross if he went about destroying peaceful glades and serene streams. It wasn't long before he could pull off most of his moves, with the exception of the Rasengan variants he could execute in his Kyubi-Chikura Moto and Biju Moto. He was infinitely glad that he had gleaned plenty of techniques from Jiraiya's notes before his arrival in Earthland. It made him more versatile, and allowed him to create even more varied identities. Replicating his mother's chakra chains was quite invigorating. He was glad to have unique techniques of both parents in his hands. Given she had seen many of his myriad jutsu, poorly Yusuke had no qualms stating he was potentially at the level of the 10 wizard saints. Naruto was skeptical about her rather blasé judgment, but accepted the praise. He figured she was trying to give him a goal to aim for. While becoming a guild master sounded somewhat like becoming Hokage, Naruto had long foregone that dream of his. Becoming Hokage quickly took the backseat when the fate of the entire world was at stake. He wasn't sure about his true leadership capabilities anyway. For all his talk about becoming the greatest Hokage ever, Naruto had all his faults cruelly exposed by the war. He knew enough about himself to recognize that he was far from Hokage material. He had the power, but not the brains. Poorly Yusuke's stories of fairy tale, a guild she obviously loved dearly and missed terribly, were full of people exactly like that. If Naruto had been a year younger, fresh into the war, he might have enjoyed his new life in Earthland, fitting into fairy tale like a glove. As it was, he had a year to turn cynical and jaded about world affairs, and wasn't too sure if he could even pretend to enjoy being the Naruto of old anymore. His mind, when not emptied during meditation, was busy crafting aliases and false identities, obsessively inventorying his large cache of equipment, and pondering the merits of becoming a hermit. He was pretty sure joining a dark guild would suit a ninja like him far better. Only the threat of being hunted, again, kept him from doing so. But joining a guild meant he could stop taking advantage of poorly Yusuke's grudging hospitality. He could find work, make money, and research dimensional travel further. Maybe one day he'll find some method to get back to his homeland. Or maybe he'll just pull the original time travel array he designed and keep trying until he made it back to the elemental countries. Maybe he could even become a magic council member, and access their archives to look for research in the field. It was the most vague of plans, and Naruto feared he might one day grow too comfortable in Earthland. But it was worth a shot. As similar as poorly Yusuke was to an older Sakura, even he would get tired of the constant nagging. It was a full month before Naruto deemed himself ready to face the wider world. taking his time to recover his body and enrich his mind. He was a mage in all but name. Poorly Yusuka privately thought the sapphire-eyed man was good to leave her abode 2 weeks earlier, but she couldn't find the heart to chase the blonde out. While he had regained some cheer, he was still very prone to bouts of melancholy. She wasn't sure if he was mentally fit to assume the role of a mage, but he wasn't displaying any signs of severe mental instability. If he had coped with the weight of the world on his shoulders for as long as he claimed he had, Poorly Yusuka was sure he could handle all the standards that a legal mage abided by. As he was packing his belongings into a series of scrolls, a branch of skills Poorly Yusuka found to be quite similar to equipped magic, she offered to cut his blonde hair like she had done for Makarov many times before. The spiky locks had reached the nape of his neck, and his fringe covered his forehead and shadowed his brilliant blue orbs. 2 long bangs framed his tanned face, and got into his face just about every time there was a breeze. He declined the offer politely, citing something about using his hair as a weapon. She chalked that up as another one of his abilities, and pointed him in the direction of Magnolia town. Naruto thanked her profusely for her impeccable aid, but Poorly Yusuka waved them away brusquely, her hand subconsciously edging towards her broom. Sensing that her anti-human sentiments were going to make themselves known before long, the blonde man bade her a hasty goodbye. The travel to Magnolia town was slow. Naruto was in no rush, and rather enjoyed taking his time for once. Ninjas usually led a hectic lifestyle, and never really gave themselves time to kick back and relax. The forest gave way to a beautiful town, arranged roughly in a grid-like pattern. Naruto walked up a tree to get a better view, Kurama cradled snugly in his arms. There was a giant lake that stretched beyond even his enhanced eyesight to Naruto's right, and from his precarious perch on top of a tree, he could identify several landmarks. According to Poorly Yusuka's instructions, Fairy Tail's guild headquarters was situated on the reclaimed patch of land that sat above the shores of the lake. His keen eyes spotted the tall building easily. After all, it was one of the biggest buildings in the small town. 888888888888888. Makarov Dreyer yawned as he entered his chambers to rest for the night. Shutting the door behind his diminutive frame, he walked to his closet, ready to shed his regular clothing for his pajamas. Opening the closet doors with a little magical stretching of his arms, for he was too short to reach the closet door handles like he could before, he stared thoughtfully at the neat stack of pajamas that sat within. You know, you're quite the scary guest. Might I suggest approaching us in the day next time? A muffled snort filled his ears. Heedless of the potential danger, he changed his clothes right there. He didn't even care if the person was watching him. The intruder could look at his wrinkled old butt for all he cared. There was a creaking noise, as the trespasser no doubt filled his wooden seat. Makarov was pretty certain the man had meant to make the sound, possibly as an indication that he was no threat. For someone to slip past his runic wards with such ease pointed to skills that would preclude mistakes such as making wooden chairs creak. I'm sorry to approach you this way, but I'm not too fond of large groups at present moment, a man's voice replied quietly. Makarov turned around calmly to gaze upon the person who stepped into his room. He had a mop of tousled, spiky blonde hair. The third guild master of Fairy Tail couldn't help but feel jealous of the man's luscious locks. He had the most intense azure eyes Makarov had ever seen, their warmth and friendliness tempered by a sense of weariness. He was dressed in a dark long-sleeved t-shirt and pants, a cloth mask that covered his face from neck to eyes, and sandals that exposed his toes and heels. A short-sleeved scarlet coat, emblazoned with black fire motifs along the bottom edge, gave him a regal aura. Black fingerless gloves covered his hands. The gloves had metal plates sewn in on the back of the hand. A black stripe of cloth was tied loosely around his neck, with another metal plate affixed to it. There was an engraving on the slate, a stylized leaf design with a spiral motif that Makarov didn't recognize as any guild symbol. Who sent you? Makarov queried curiously. They were not a big guild even with the powerful mages that have made it their home past and present, and Makarov didn't recall making any enemies. The man's eyes crinkled in what the elderly mage assumed was a smile. Poorly Yusuka-san recommended your guild to me. Poorly Yusuka? Makarov scratched his chin. If you want to join our guild, there's no need to be sneaky about it, you know. I know, but I have a proposition for you, the man declared, crossing his arms as he leaned back into the chair. You can speak with Poorly Yusuka-san to corroborate my words. I am from another dimension that is not parallel to this one. I have a past I'd rather not reveal too much of, and I hope you won't pester Poorly Yusuka-san about the few details I've let leak. But in my world I'm a ninja. From the descriptions of mages Poorly Yusuka-san gave me, I'm guessing espionage, subterfuge, sabotage, and assassinations are not welcome here. You can choose not to do those things anymore. Makarov shrugged easily, trotting over to his large bed. He had no reason to distrust the man's words. The fact that he snuck into his room spoke volumes. Hopping on the soft surface of his mattress, he silently assessed the man's strength. While he didn't seem to have any magical powers, Makarov was reasonably sure the man was just suppressing his presence to a ridiculous degree. You are strong. You can easily be S-class. There's no need for you to worry about work or money. Thank you for your offer, but I have a better one. The man leaned forwards, placing his elbows on his knees. He gazed deep into Makarov's obsidian eyes, and the wizard saint was taken aback by the seriousness that the man exuded. I can do all that dirty work for you anonymously. You know as well as I do that there is no true peace, and there will always be a need for the dirtier things to be done. Makarov shook his head despondently. You are a rather depressing man, to think in such pessimistic terms. I was in a war that involved the whole world, and I ended up being the last man standing. I brainstormed for a year to find a way to change things around, while being incessantly hunted by the strongest man alive, the blonde said matter-of-factly. I think I'm entitled to such thought processes. Fairy Tail doesn't engage in such seedy matters, Makarov declared staunchly, his lips twisted in a childish pout. If you want to join, then do so in the open. The intruder sighed in exasperation, running a hand through his gloriously thick hair. Makarov grumbled under his breath at the unfairness of the world as the man took a minute to formulate his words. I can join the guild in a guise, while doing your spying in another form. I'll like to think I am fairly proficient at infiltration and impersonation. Why do you have to hide your true form in Fairy Tail? Makarov grunted, crossing his arms stoutly. Once you join Fairy Tail, this is your home. It's a place to let your hair down. The man's eyes widened at the mention of home, watering slightly. Makarov hid a small smile at the man's obvious desire for acceptance. To be the last man standing and hunted for a year must have taken a toll on him. He looks like he barely got out of his diapers too. So? Do you accept my terms? I will only need you to do a bit of recon here and there for me. Poorly Yusuka might have left this out, but we really are at peace. There's fairly little conflict that cannot be solved with diplomacy around here. Don't let the war in your world consume you. This is your new home now. You really know how to talk, old man, the cerulean-eyed man teased, standing up. I see why poorly Yusuka-san loves you. You have a good heart, old man. Bah, like that old bat will have feelings for me, Makarov snorted, waving his hand dismissively. Now shoo, boy, this old man needs his rest. See you tomorrow then, the man bowed grandiosely, before he vanished from view instantly. Chapter 2, Kana, Act 774. Kana Albrona, aged 8, swung her legs listlessly as she sat on a wooden bar stool in the large guild hall of Fairy Tail. Her eyes were downcast as she noticed all the guild members milling about in the hall, chatting happily. She was the only one of her age group, and that precluded her from plenty of conversations. Oh, it wasn't that the people of Fairy Tail were unfriendly, far from it. However, it was difficult for an 8-year-old to make friends with people a few years older than her. Even Laxus, who was just 5 years older, treated her like a bothersome little kid instead of a fellow guild member. As an 8-year-old, she wasn't exactly the strongest mage around either. She couldn't take a lot of missions, and that made it harder for Kana to fit in. Oh, how she longed to grow up faster. That way, she could grow stronger, and maybe gain the courage to tell her father whom she really was. She knew he was a mage of Fairy Tail, but it didn't seem obvious that he was a very strong mage at that time. Now, she just didn't know how to approach him without making an embarrassment of herself. Then, there was also Mikao Konbold. She blushed lightly, unwilling to continue with that train of thought. She was too young to think of love and marriage. What are you thinking of? A large hand patted her head gently. She turned her head as she perked up, staring at the man who sat down beside her. Hi. My name's Rafaga Remolino. What's yours? See Kana Alberona, Remolino-san, Kana stuttered, her cheeks darkening as she regarded the red-coated man with awe. Her eyes then shifted to the small fox that was snuggled into the man's arms. The little canine was sleeping soundly, soft breaths rustling the cloth on the mage's arm. The man chortled softly, his eyes closing into happy crescents as he handed the fox over to the little girl, who squealed happily as she cuddled the furry animal. This is Karama. And you can call me Rafaga. So, Kana-chan, what bothers a pretty girl so? Blushing even deeper at the praise, she turned away, hoping the man wouldn't see her embarrassment. Mikao was instantly erased from her mind at that moment. Not that he would know anything of that. The older man might have been handsome and dashing, but nothing beat a mysterious masked man with eye-catching golden hair and deep cobalt orbs. I don't have a lot of friends, Rafaga-san. That is a problem. The man stroked his clothed chin thoughtfully. How about I become your friend, Kana-chan? The girl's eyes widened considerably, as hope filled her eyes. She blushed once more as she shyly grabbed his large hand with hers, twisting her pinky finger around his. She nearly dropped the fox, but he woke up just in time to land safely in her lap. Pinky promise. We'll be friends forever, Rafaga-niken. All right. The blonde man did his eye smile once again, ruffling Kana's black tresses. I'm new around town, so I'm going to need a tour. Can you help me, Kana-chan? The girl grinned happily, before dragging the man out of the lunch hall. The fox trotted behind them, content with following at a more sedate pace. Gazing down from the second floor, Makarov smiled fondly as he watched the two leave the guild doors to explore Magnolia town. Let's see if little Kana-chan can't turn you into the mushiest older brother yet. 8. Being a member of Fairy Tail for 2 years already, Kana was well versed in the layout of Magnolia town. She took him on a haphazard route around the place, pointing out the various hotspots to see in the friendly town. Kana waved happily at various townsfolk as they traveled through the cobblestone streets, visiting the Karda Cathedral and the South Gate Park amongst other shops and sights. Naruto sighed forlornly as he recalled the short moment in time where Konoha's citizens acknowledged his worth as a fellow villager and a protector. all of them cheering for him despite the destruction of all of Konoha's infrastructure. His eyes misted up as nostalgia washed over him. A sharp tug on his arm brought him out of his musings abruptly. Kana looked rather worried, her warm brown eyes widening at the sight of tears gathering at the edge of Naruto's eyes. Rafaganaken, am I making you sad? Tell me, I promise we'll go do something fun and make you happy. Blinking away the tears, Naruto squatted down to Kana's eye level. His eyes were curved into happy arcs as he flicked the girl on her forehead. She pouted childishly as she rubbed her forehead, but Naruto recognized the glint in her eyes. He had seen it in the mirror many times before, the fear of rejection, the terror of loneliness and the glimmer of hope that flickered so weakly. His heart melted at the sight, as he planted a gentle kiss on her forehead. Don't worry about me, Kana-chan. I'm just thinking about all my friends. Magnolia Town is a happy place, and it just reminded me of my old home. The blushing girl didn't seem convinced by his explanation, but nodded emphatically as she dragged him along once more. Let's go to the cake shop. Since you're new, Rafaganaken, I'll treat you. But you'll have to go on missions and make lots of money to treat me back next time, okay? For the first time in more than a year, Naruto laughed in joy at the pure innocence of the young girl. He found the warm feeling that engulfed his chest to be a very comfortable one. Even the most somber of thoughts could not dislodge the invisible hand that clutched his heart so warmly. To think, my determination to stay anonymous crumbling in the face of a cute little girl's smile. How can I muster the will to return home, when I feel more comfortable here than anywhere since Konoha was still standing? Makarov, I hope you won't regret letting a killer like me around your impressionable children. I don't think I can bring myself to leave now. Kana giggled joyously as Naruto snagged her around the waist, placing her on his shoulders. Securing her by holding on to her legs gently, Naruto asked about her experiences at Fairy Tail. The girl was eager to oblige the masked man, chattering away about the guild. It was relaxing to hear the funny stories of various guild members and their antics, and the day blurred away. Before he knew it, he was walking them back towards the guild with cake crumbs in his hair, and his head swimming with everything Kana could remember. He had forgotten when he last had such an enjoyable time. With everything that has happened in my life, I think it was that last meal with Erosenin before we returned to Konoha that felt the most heartwarming. Brushing aside the recollections for the umpteenth time that day, Naruto placed his attention on the road ahead. The duo had fallen into a companionable silence. Suddenly, he paused in his tracks. Frowning, he looked at the ground with intrigue. Why did you stop, Rafaganaken? Kana questioned inquisitively. The ground is shifting, Naruto replied cautiously. His head tilted up as he pinned his gaze on a flying loudspeaker with wings. Bells starting chiming while the loudspeaker hollered that Gildarts had returned. People scrambled towards the main road, no doubt to see the famous mage return to Fairy Tail. The ground trembled as houses and streets shifted, reorganized to expose a straight road from the city entrance to the Fairy Tail headquarters. Instead of being excited, however, Kana remained suspiciously silent. Reading her mood, Naruto held his tongue as townsfolk rushed past them to catch a glimpse of Gildarts. Once the majority had gone by, Naruto tapped the young girl on her leg. Who's Gildarts to you? The blonde man asked softly. Kana sniffled as she played with Naruto's spiky locks absent-mindedly. He's my dad. But he doesn't know. You joined Fairy Tail to find him, didn't you? Naruto inferred. But you didn't dare tell him because he's a famous mage, and you got scared, right? Kana nodded, unwilling to trust her voice not to sound choked. Hey, don't worry. Rafaganaken will help you learn magic, so when you become stronger, you can tell him that he has a beautiful daughter named Kana Alberona, Naruto offered. Kana rubbed her runny nose, a small grin on her face that Naruto couldn't see. Promise? The blonde man raised his fist to head level, sticking out his pinky finger. Kana giggled as she hooked her pinky finger to the azure-eyed ninjas once again. Promise. Now come on, let's go back to the guild. I want to see Gildarts too, like everyone else. Okay. 888888888888888. Gildarts was a favorite of every guild member, and it wasn't hard to see why. Although he was often out of town, that was only the case because he accepted and completed missions with great fervor, bringing fame and good reputation back to Fairy Tail and Magnolia Town. He was friendly and generous, and a good sport for most activities, judging by Kana's awestruck gaze at Gildarts' excellent alcohol tolerance. Having beaten 3 men at drinking games without pause, and taking on a 4th, Naruto reckoned she would become a raging alcoholic in a few years' time. And she would probably be able to handle herself too, Naruto mused in mild horror, as Gildarts downed another tall mug of beer with a loud cheer. Watching the celebrations through the windows from the outside, Naruto could only manage a maudlin smile at the happiness that seemed overabundant in the guild. Kurama snorted as he nuzzled Naruto's leg, noticing the man's gloom. He hadn't learned quite enough words to express his concern in speech yet, but Naruto noticed and appreciated the fox's actions all the same. Bending down to scoop the canine into his arms, the fox flicked his nose with a paw, before deigning to be carried. Naruto grinned weakly at his companion, mumbling a quiet word of gratitude. You know, kiddo, you'll disappoint Kana if you don't join in and try to beat Gildarts at drinking, a playful voice called out from beneath him. Without looking downwards, Naruto addressed the shorter man. I don't think I can survive with that much alcohol in my bloodstream. Or at least I've never tried. And what about you, old man? Why aren't you in there celebrating too? I came out here to give you your guild emblem, Makarov responded, his voice conveying mock annoyance. Where do you want it, and in what color, you bothersome, needy brat? Naruto chuckled as he maneuvered the fox onto one arm, while removing the glove for his right hand. Pointing the palm at the elder mage, he smiled gratefully. In orange. Thanks. Makarov took the large magical stamp in his hand, and pressed it against Naruto's palm. A soft glow emanated from the point of contact, and when the guild master removed the item from skin, the orange fairy tale emblem was magically tattooed on Naruto's palm. The blond man tugged his glove on once more, hiding the logo from plain view. Makarov shook his head at the cerulean-eyed man's obvious symbolism behind wearing his gloves over the emblem, before taking out a piece of paper and waving it under Naruto's nose, literally. I don't know if you had these in your world, but this is a check, the Titan magic wielder explained matter-of-factly. It represents a certain amount of money that corresponds to funds in the bank. You had banks from where you came from, right? I know what checks are. Naruto took the small slip gingerly, flashing a feeble grin at the guild master. For an apartment? Makarov nodded sagely, and tucked the check into an inner pocket in Naruto's coat. How the man knew of the pocket, Naruto didn't really want to find out. It's only a loan from the guild, for new members to get a place before they start getting any income. That should tide you over for the first 3 months. Thanks, old man, Naruto whispered, as he seemed to melt into the darkness of night. I'll see you around. Makarov sighed in chagrin as he strolled back into the lunch hall. What a silly brat. 8. Naruto didn't see the need to rent his own apartment, but he supposed it would be nice to have a permanent place in Magnolia town instead of sleeping in his tent in East Forest. Securing a place to live wasn't too difficult a task. The people were more than willing to rent places out to fairy tale members. Instead of an apartment though, Naruto opted to rent a whole house with all the money he was loaned. The 2-story house was situated on the northern side of town, near the fairy tale building. The front of the house faced Lake Siliora for a spectacular view. He didn't need the space, but he had several ideas in mind as to what he wanted to use all the room for. The house was built with solid bricks, with a coat of orange paint slathered over. Naruto supposed he could afford to indulge in such frivolities. He picked the house precisely because it was orange, though he wouldn't admit that to anyone. The second story was smaller than the first, making space for a balcony that sat above the front of the house, stretching from side to side. Wooden railings and beams secured the open space, and a sliding door led into the house from the veranda. A smaller regular door beside the sliding door also led into the house. 2 chairs and a small table sat on the balcony, angled for a perfect view of the lake. The front door was carved from heavy wood, and the windows on both levels were simple rectangular panes of glass, held in place by wooden frames. A chimney stretched above the brown-tiled, sloped roof, with small windows for the attic. Through the front door was the living room, complete with simple furnishings such as a long couch, coffee table, a bookshelf and a display cabinet. A soft oval rug sat in the middle of the room, the bright yellow carpet making a contrast with the shiny parquet floor. The fireplace was to the side of the couch, a simple brick construction on the wall due east. The walls were painted a cheerful sky blue. Further into the house, on an elevation, was the kitchen-cum-dining area. The kitchen was well equipped with a cooking stove and various cupboards that held utensils and crockery. Naruto even found a fine china set, and a half-empty box of tea bags. A long oval table and 6 matching chairs stood on the middle of the area, with a decorative bowl of fruits seated in the center. A wooden spiraling staircase led to the second floor, situated on the east wall of the house. Climbing up the rickety stairs, Naruto came upon a short corridor stretching from back to front of the house, with the chimney column visibly protruding from the wall. At the end of the corridor was the door that led to the balcony. There were 2 rooms flanking a central bathroom, each room taking roughly half the space of the second story. The walls on the second floor were coated in paint of a relaxing grass green. The room at the back end of the house featured windows on each external wall, allowing glorious sunlight to illuminate the room in the day. Within each room was a bed, desk and a floor-to-ceiling closet, amongst other furnishings. Plain white curtains went with the white dresser in the far corner of the rooms, and the square crimson carpets were nice juxtapositions. The bathroom was equipped with a shower and stone bath shielded by cheerful shower curtains, which was a luxury Naruto wasn't able to enjoy for what felt like the longest time. There was a medicine cabinet cum mirror above the porcelain sink, and a toilet, with the washroom covered in gleaming white tiles. The room on the front of the house was the one that led to the balcony through the paper sliding door. Marking it as his preferred room, Naruto proceeded to climb to the attic, where it was completely empty far the odd spiderweb. The sloping ceiling of the attic made it a tight squeeze for the blonde to move about, but he managed. He had gotten into the habit of keeping all his items on his body in case he needed to make a quick getaway, but without the looming threat of Uchiha Madara, his paranoia was forcibly restrained. Dumping much of his weapons and equipment in the attic, Naruto resolved to find some weapons store or blacksmith to do maintenance for his large cache. His sealed food supplies went into the empty cabinets in the kitchen, and he made a mental note to check the buying price for the house, if the landlord was willing to sell. It was far larger than his former apartment, and despite being light years away from Konoha, the place felt homely already. His next job was to put up ceiling wards in the house. He was sure the landlord wouldn't mind several helpful seals to keep the place secure, and it wasn't going to be difficult for the blonde man to remove the wards anyway. Plastering pre-made Fuin scripts on various walls of the house, inside and out, he sealed the home and rooms from leaking noise, and a simple barrier that both informed him of others' arrival, as well as deny entry to anyone with bad intent. He had to tie that one to his well-honed sensor ability to sense emotions, derived from the innate power granted by using Kurama's chakra. He was insanely glad for that piece of foresight, in spite of the work that it took. Forming two Kagebunshin, they wordlessly performed a transformation, turning into two nondescript civilians. He didn't want to draw attention to himself by having clones running about. One of them headed off to look for a weapons store, while the other went in search of a florist. Naruto still retained his desire to cultivate flora, even if he hadn't had a chance to practice his green thumb for nearly 3 years. Leaving his doppelgangers to complete whatever additions to the house they deemed necessary, Naruto strolled sedately towards Fairy Hills. The female dormitories were located on a hill that overlooked Lake Ciliora and Magnolia Town. He followed the beaten path up to the large building, passing under the arch sign without pause. Before he could tap on the front door, however, he was confronted with a short, elderly woman. Her gray hair was organized neatly into a bun, and wrinkles adorned her age's face. She wore a striking red cardigan and skirt combination, with a pink blouse underneath. A pink ribbon was secured around a white, frilly collar, and black boots completed the ensemble. Before he could even open his mouth to ask, she let out a hair-raising screech. "What's a man doing up here in Fairy Hills?" she yelled, raising an angry fist at the far taller man. "Get lost. I'm just looking for Kana-chan." Naruto raised his hands up on the universal gesture for surrender. "Can you tell her Rafaga is here to see her? How do you know Kana-chan is here?" The woman narrowed her eyes dangerously, before shouting once more. "Pervert! Leave!" Naruto groaned. "Look, I'm a sensor, and I can sense her presence in the building. Actually, you know what, I'll just wait here. She's coming down now." Before the shrill voice of the elderly woman could fill the air again, a girl not much bigger than her appeared from behind. Kana was dressed in her usual brown, checkered dress, but she had not tied her hair up in her usual ponytail. The raven locks fell to her shoulder blades, covering her bare shoulders. She wore a cute pout as she placed her fists on her hips in an angry pose. "Rafaga Niken, where were you last night?" The old woman Naruto guessed was the matron of the dormitories was completely ignored as Naruto scratched the back of his head nervously. I was just scouring the town for a place." "In the night?" Kana cocked her head to the side, bewildered. "Yeah," Naruto cleared his throat uncomfortably. He was horrible at lying in the face to children. They had the uncanny ability to stare him down and make him feel like shit. Women had that same ability to extricate the truth from him too. "Actually, I've rented the house this morning, and I have a spare room. Do you want to?" Kana squealed as she rushed forward to hug Naruto, jumping at his chest. The blonde laughed as he caught the brown-eyed girl by the waist, his eyes softening at her wide smile. "I guess that's a yes." "Are you sure? Your matron over there seems rather unhappy." Kana turned her head backwards, sending a heart-wrenching pout at the woman. Her loud, and disregarded, protests died the moment she was faced with the little girl's most potent weapon. Sighing, she growled for the girl to get her stuff packed, and snarled at Naruto, warning him to stay outside the dormitories. The blonde could only chuckle weakly as Kana squirmed out of his grip to run back to her room, trailed by the angrily muttering matron. Before long, the girl had bounded out of the dormitory doors, several bags packed carelessly. Cloth stuck out of the bags at various spots, and the matron looked rather disapproving of the disorganized luggage. Naruto hesitated for a moment, before he raised his gloved palms. Metallic chains sprung out from his hands, wrapping around the handles for all the baggage. Kana gasped in admiration as the sapphire-eyed man proceeded to carry all the bags in this manner. Thanking the matron, Kana didn't look back as she ran ahead of Naruto, a childish laughter on her lips. The blonde mage, however, cast a glance back at the matron, his eyes curved into reassuring eye smiles. "I'll take good care of her." "You better," the woman sniffed sternly, unable to hide the wobble in her voice. Naruto nodded firmly, before he took several big strides to catch up with Kana. The girl was far too thrilled by the prospect of staying with him though, and was prancing down the long flight of steps from Fairy Hills to Magnolia Town already. She tapped her foot impatiently at the bottom of the hill as she waited for the slower Naruto. When he reached the foot of the hill, she was restrained by another chain snaking around her waist. "Don't be so anxious, you don't even know where the house is." Kana blushed in embarrassment, and meekly followed Naruto as he walked the short journey back to his place. "Or is that our place?" he pondered idly. A fresh chain sprouted from his spine and dived into his pocket, retrieving a silver key from within. Handing it to the excited raven-haired girl, she snatched it from Naruto and fumbled to insert the key. Once she unlocked the door, she dashed into the house, cheering happily. "Master Makarov!" Kana exclaimed, stopping in her tracks. Makarov, dressed in a white shirt emblazoned with the fairy tale logo, orange shorts and a blue and black striped jester hat, waved cheerfully in reply. "Yo!" Naruto, holding all of Kana's belongings in his arms dexterously, mumbled a greeting at the diminutive man, who had seated himself in the comfortable cream-colored couch. Kana then promptly ignored the presence of Makarov as she went to explore the rest of the house, scrambling up the stairwell and disappearing upstairs. Makarov shook his head, a chiding tone in his voice. Really, I loaned you a sum for renting an apartment for 3 months, and you get a house like this? To think I pegged you for a thriftier type. I am thrifty. But what's a little indulgence here and there? I don't think I have to fear about money here, Naruto retorted coolly. I have never enjoyed luxury before, so I thought, why not now? And the reason for letting Kana stay here? Makarov queried, pointing at all the luggage Naruto carried back from Fairy Hills. Naruto shrugged, a soft smile on his face. I think she's lonely there. Your choice, Makarov chirped in a sing-song voice, a twinkle in his eye. There's hope for him yet. Then, a questioning frown crossed his features. How did you get this place for 250,000 jewels anyway? It's a bit cheap for such a big place with that kind of view. I offered my help as a handyman to the landlord. He was very happy he didn't have to spend exorbitant amounts of money hiring the members of the Workers' Guild to help with basic repair and maintenance work for all his properties anymore, the blonde man explained, before he winked at his leader mischievously. I also promised I would consider dating his beautiful yet frustratingly lesbian daughter. But don't let anyone know about that one. Makarov had a silly grin perched on his face when Kana returned from her short exploration around the house. When he giggled in a high-pitched tone, she decided adults were weird. Night had fallen quickly. Having unpacked all her belongings, and under Naruto's loose supervision, in a neat fashion, Kana was insistent on Naruto getting a big meal to commemorate his joining of Fairy Tail. Makarov, who was enjoying an iced tea on the veranda, Naruto wasn't sure where the tea came from or the glass for that matter, offered to treat the new member. One thing led to another, and Naruto found himself sitting at the bar after dinner with the rest of the guild, where he found new drinking buddies in the Cow Bolt and Wakaba Mine. Kana was playing with Kurama, and showing off the cute fox to the rest of the ladies in the guild. Naruto chuckled at the blissful look the fox was sporting as he was squashed into many soft, suffocating bosoms. You're new around here, aren't you? Naruto looked up from his mug to look at the tall, imposing man that was Gildarts Clive. Nodding silently, Naruto went back to sipping his beer through his mask. Kana had been extremely intrigued by that feat, but Naruto refused to reveal his secret. A hearty laugh and slap to the back caused him to spill most of the alcohol, and he glared venomously at the Fairy Tail ace. Gildarts grinned roguishly, gulping down his own half-filled mug of beer. He smacked his lips as he slammed the mug on the bar top, cracking the polished surface carelessly. Say, how about a drinking contest? First to collapse loses? Naruto was quickly greeted with several cheers from the crowd, and a particularly loud holler from Kana. Shrugging helplessly, he was handed a huge barrel of beer, as was Gildarts. The older man grinned maniacally as he held his hand on the tap. Naruto scratched the back of his head as he tried to estimate how many times more alcohol was in the barrel than he was used to imbibing. Do you do this to every newcomer? Haha, only those of age. Gildarts grinned effusively. To Fairy Tail, shaking his head in amusement, he followed Gildarts' lead as he grabbed the wooden barrel by the edge of the base, and tipped the open tap to his lips. The Crash Magic Mage was first to finish his drink, a loud exclamation of satisfaction following smashing the barrel on the bar top. Naruto took his time with the beer, but was only half a minute slower than his compatriot. He was also more careful with his barrel, managing not to send splinters flying everywhere as Gildarts had done. The red-haired man chortled loudly as he called for another 2 barrels of booze. You can hold your liquor well, eh? Gildarts clapped him on the shoulder. Good man. I think it's a necessity in Fairy Tail, the blonde replied dryly, earning another set of laughter from the watching crowd. Reluctant to get shit-faced drunk, he was about to decline the next barrel when he saw Kana's reverential gaze. His formerly iron will once more defeated by the little girl, he grabbed the barrel as it was being handed to him. Bottoms up? The hurrah reverberated through the lunch hall as Naruto tilted the barrel and his head back in tandem. It was this noisy sight that Grateful Buster stumbled upon as he entered through the front doors of Fairy Tail. No one paid the child any mind, as they were too busy making bets on whether the newcomer could possibly beat Gildarts at drinking. The black-haired boy yelled for someone's attention, but he was shouting against a whole mob of alcoholics. His frustrations boiling over, he was about to march up to one of them and demand to see the guild master when he was tapped on the shoulder. Whirling around, he had to look down to see the man who stopped him. Are you here to join the guild? The short, balding man asked jovially. Gray crossed his arms in an attempt to look more menacing. Given he was only 8, he failed miserably. Are you the guild master? Makarov grinned as he flashed the boy a thumbs up. Makarov Dreyer at your service. Can you reverse ice shell? The young mage asked bluntly. Makarov, undaunted by the child's rudeness, shook his head in the negative. Not without killing the user. Oh, the boy mumbled, his hopeful eyes downcast. Makarov magically extended his arm, patting the young boy on his shoulder. Hey, don't worry. We'll find a way to reverse ice shell together, eh? You must have come a long way to find us. Why don't you join Fairy Tail? We're a big family, and we love helping each other. It's a good place for a kiddo like you. Hi. Nice to meet you. A breathy voice called out from behind him. Gray twisted around, to face a young girl of his age. She smiled merrily, sticking a hand out. "Welcome to Fairy Tale." "I'm Kana." Gray grabbed the hand, shaking it vigorously. "I'm Gray." Kana looked at the boy with what seemed like pity. "We got to get you some clothes though, you'll freeze like that." Staring down at his bare torso, Gray squeaked. "Oh no! Where are my clothes?" Makarov and Kana laughed uproariously at the boy's silly antics. At the bar, Naruto smiled around the tap of his fourth barrel of beer. Not that anyone would know. They were too drunk to notice he was drinking through his cloth mask anyway. "He'll be the first of many friends, Kana." The first of many. Chapter 3, Maelstrom, Act 775 Act 776. Yajima first came into contact with Maelstrom when he was returning to his abode after a long day listening to the rest of the Magic Council prattling on about a dark guild, Tria. Led by 3 A-class mages who regularly terrorized the small town of Kurabana, a short distance from Shiratsum. They were very suddenly taken out by an unknown entity. Kurabana residents, who found the guild members dumped in their main town square, unconscious and securely tied up, alerted the Rune Knights to their defeat. Interrogation of the Tria members proved fruitless. They only caught a glimpse of the man's hooded navy blue cloak. There were no telltale insignias, no facial features, nothing they could use for identification. He didn't use any specialized magic they could use to ascertain his true identity either. He was just too fast, and took out the admittedly weak Dark Guild with nothing but fists and feet. The A-class mages that led the Dark Guild only knew what the man had called himself, Maelstrom. They were told by the man to relay his self-proclaimed title to the Magic Council. It sent the members into what Yajima could only call a collective apoplexy. A nameless man, with no guild affiliations, had made the Magic Council into a laughingstock. After all, the Kurabana citizens had put up a request to the council to get rid of the Dark Guild months ago. It was a huge dent to their pride that some lone ranger settled the issue before the great Magic Council could. With no concrete way they could think of to track down the elusive man, they were tempted to declare him a vigilante, and send out requests to various guilds to have him captured. However, the heroic actions of Maelstrom had captivated the Kurabana townsfolk, and his name spread like wildfire. Before the Magic Council could reach any decision regarding the mage, the increasingly exaggerated tales of how Maelstrom saved Kurabana from utter annihilation had reached the far corners of Fiori. The council's hands were tied. They couldn't possibly demand for his arrest anymore. People would lose their faith in the council, and that was something they couldn't ever bear to bring upon themselves. Image was everything to them. Yajima was rather ambivalent over the whole issue. On one hand, he understood the dangers of having a lone vigilante of such strength going unmonitored. He could easily turn nasty, and start attacking legal guilds or worse, innocent civilians. On the other hand, he did the people of Kurabana a great service, and not being tethered to the strict laws of the Magic Council, could do far more good than mages tied to a guild. Hence, he didn't speak a word during the marathon meeting, opting to abstain from the argument between council members. After the meeting, he found an innocuous letter sitting on his table. It was not standard practice to leave letters on councilmen's tables, unsecured. Trusted couriers usually delivered them personally to the hand of the councilman. Curious, he read the letter, admiring the audacity and skill of the perpetrator. It was a note from Maelstrom. He claimed he was from Fairy Tale, but wished to be anonymous. He didn't want the rest of the council to know of his involvement with Fairy Tale, in fear of destroying the guild's reputation. In order to secure Yajima's trust in his words, the elderly councilman was encouraged to seek out Makarov, who was already informed of Yajima's possible questioning. A quick missive to Makarov was responded by his old teammate, stating very simply that Maelstrom was to be trusted as a Fairy Tale guild member. Yajima was convinced. He trusted Makarov with his life, and whatever Makarov trusted was definitely trustworthy. Maelstrom had asked for his help to sell his services to the council, as an independent mage. Yajima relayed that message to the rest of the council, and they were both pleased with the mage's commitment to them, and dismayed by his anonymity. Given they were in a position to benefit from Maelstrom's actions, by associating the good deeds with the council and denouncing the bad deeds as the rogue actions of an independent mage, they accepted the deal offered by Maelstrom. Yajima became the official liaison between Maelstrom and the Magic Council. He initially didn't know how to communicate with Maelstrom about the council's acceptance of his terms. Figuring the man was probably watching him, Yajima left a letter on his desk as Maelstrom did before. He retired for the night. In the morning, a confirmation note replaced that letter. That became the main mode of communication between the lone mage and the Magic Council. Yajima did ask Maelstrom why he didn't use Fairy Tale as a channel for their messages. Maelstrom apparently didn't want the possibility of someone else in Fairy Tale accidentally opening those letters. Yajima chalked that up to paranoia, and promptly left it alone. In a measly year, Maelstrom had, on unrecorded missions of the Magic Council, taken down 6 dark guilds of varying sizes and strength. The takedowns were quiet and efficient, usually. Within a week or so of requesting Maelstrom to investigate a certain dark guild, the members of said guild would be secured and dumped at the front door of the prisons, ready for instant incarceration. The councilmen weren't too sure if Maelstrom was showboating or just trying to make the Rune Knights' lives easier, but they accepted that his methods were his, and allowed him to continue with his stellar work. While the common folk were not made cognizant of Maelstrom's involvement in taking down dark guilds, the council sold it as the heroic actions of the Rune Knights. it was unavoidable for people to see the now famous navy cloak and associate it with the sudden disappearance of a dark guild in the area days later. Citizens weren't as stupid as to notice the lack of the Rune Knight's presence in the vicinity of the dark guilds that were taken down either. It did diminish the council's reputation minutely, but given their official stance was all that mattered to them and their concept of a good image, the council allowed the whispers and murmurings to continue. The rumors had grown to the extent that people were touting Maelstrom for recognition as one of the 10 wizard saints. The council had already dismissed 2 petitions from towns that received help from Maelstrom. However, given his excellent record and his increasingly important role doing the work of the Magic Council as an independent contractor, some of the less stubborn councilmen had taken to that idea. Yajima often wondered why Maelstrom refused to reveal his ties to Fairy Tail. There really was no reason for such an action, even though the Magic Council ordered legal guilds not to fight dark guilds in any capacity. The missions from the council were secret, and the Rune Knights took the official credit for the work anyway. Maelstrom had established enough goodwill with the council to safely unveil his loyalties without repercussions to Fairy Tail. In various discussions with Makarov, he was reassured many times that the man had his reasons for doing so. Makarov told him that Maelstrom loathed reputation, and was more comfortable with hiding his skills. The guild master had encouraged the man to expose his true abilities before, but the man refused, even though doing so would enhance Fairy Tail's repute greatly. The Magic Council member then understood Maelstrom's staunch desire to prevent his identity from being leaked. When a copycat mage was brutally murdered by a dark guild, there had been plenty of mages who took the guise of Maelstrom by donning his now distinctive navy cloak, and used the man's reputation to intimidate others or gain benefits from unknowing civilians. The impersonators were usually dealt with by Maelstrom himself, stringing them up somewhere, unharmed, and informing them that they ought to stop taking advantage of his name. But one of them got too cocky. Thinking the stature of Maelstrom was enough to deter a dark guild member, he taunted one. He was swiftly made an example of, and various dark guilds were getting involved in hunting down the elusive mage. Maelstrom was scared for his loved ones, and afraid of Fairy Tail getting targeted by his adversaries. Yajima was infinitely glad for Maelstrom's choice then. He was a former member of Fairy Tail, and he still harbored great love for the guild. Famous mages like Gildarts never had to worry for their guilds, because they never made themselves enemies of dark guilds. With the Magic Council's strict laws regarding inter-guild wars, legal guilds were usually not in conflict with dark guilds unless provoked first. If a man like Maelstrom, known for taking down entire dark guilds alone, was associated with Fairy Tail, then it was very possible for Fairy Tail members to be attacked in order to gain petty revenge, or lure Maelstrom out to kill him. The copycat mage incident was morbid, but it served to scare any other mages from wearing that navy cloak again. When the dark guild responsible for the brutal murder was disbanded a month later, Maelstrom had each one of their defeated members dumped unceremoniously on the doorstep of practically every other dark guild. It sent a very harsh message that the dark guilds heeded hastily. Maelstrom knew where all of them were, and was capable of reaching them without detection. Innocent people were to be left out of the dark guild's vendetta against him. The unspoken threat hung over the dark guilds for a good 2 months before any of them dared pick up unsanctioned missions once more. 88888888888888. Naruto perused the note he had swiped from Yajima's table minutes ago, licking a popsicle while sitting upside down on the ceiling of a corridor. That corridor was deep inside the Rune Knight's headquarters, with plenty of the council task force members passing by underneath him, unaware of his presence. Even the loud sucking noises he made went unnoticed. Naruto snorted as he thought of the various shouting matches Rune Knight commander meetings had degenerated into, all over his work. They had their pride seriously dented when the council preferred his services over theirs. Painted a picture of the Rune Knights accomplishing those deeds when they haven't, and Naruto actually doing their work better than they ever did. If they weren't incompetent enough not to notice me even when I'm barely hiding myself, they might have some skills to justify the existence of their bruised pride. Naruto shook his head, enjoying his little treat as he memorized the mission details on the paper. He had little respect for those who expected their pointless titles to mean something, who let their egos blind them to their failings. I was like that once. Boy, did that war change things around. I can't believe just how immature I was before. Apparently there was a small dark guild named Infernum operating in the vicinity of Matsubara, a village located at the base of Mt. Himawari, an active volcano. Naruto wasn't too sure why people would find the risks of an eruption worth the extremely fertile volcanic soil they had access to, but he was no agriculturalist. He was in no position to judge. They were apparently kidnapping townsfolk for whatever nefarious purposes they had, and the small town had requested for help to deal with the Dark Guild. The guild had been there for years apparently, extorting protection money from the people. They were too afraid to fight back, and when threatened with death if they tried to get help, the travesties went unnoticed. The guild was conscientious though. The scant few visitors the village had never found out about their operations, though how they managed that feat was a big unknown. Any sale of agricultural products was done in larger towns further into Fiori, and the guild was the one to handle the goods. They extracted their own commissions from helping sell the farmers' goods, which ensured no one from the town could reach for assistance while outside of the town and consequently, their absolute control. Only when the kidnappings had started to occur on a semi-regular basis did someone gather the courage to sneak out of Matsubara and contact local law enforcement in the next town about the dire situation. The request moved up the chain of authority quickly, and reached the Magic Council before long. Unable to stomach the thought of appearing uncaring to the populace, the council immediately ordered a mission to eliminate Infernum. It was a whole load of pointless posturing in Naruto's mind. Only the thought of his actions doing some good for the helpless had convinced him to continue his tireless and thankless work for the council, and their myriad publicity stunts. Yajima helpfully informed him that the council was planning to send a contingent of rune knights to the area in 3 days' time, just in case Naruto didn't make it back. The blonde man guessed it was a good, if transparent plan to eliminate him if they deemed such actions necessary. They could easily set off the volcano to cover up any misdeeds, call the loss of innocent lives a major tragedy, before going right back to their usual scheming. There was nothing truly important there anyway. He could already imagine the fierce debates between the council members right then, arguing for either his survival and continued service, or the death of an independent mage they only had the illusion of control over. None of them really appreciated his skulking skills when Yajima cheerfully informed them of his form of correspondence with Maelstrom, burning said correspondence with a minor application of fire chakra, and scattering the ashes to avoid it raining down conspicuously on the platoon of rune knights marching past. Naruto finished off the last bit of his popsicle. He had work to do. Naruto, covered in the signature navy blue cloak of Maelstrom, sighed inaudibly as he garnered plenty of curious and admiring looks from people as he walked into the closest town before Matsubara. He had learned not to be too keen on being famous, given how that would have been counterproductive to hiding from Madara. It had felt good once before, when he was still seeking acknowledgement from his fellow villagers. But that time had passed, and Naruto almost wished he had retained that same caution when he reached Earthland. He had accepted helping people of Fiori as a lifelong mission to atone for his abandonment of the elemental countries, but he didn't expect the people to regard him with even greater reverence than Konoha citizens did after he fought Pain. He had enough admirers now that some towns he helped had shop names coined after his moniker. Fearing his identity leaking should someone attempt to swipe his hood off his head to see what he really looked like, he designed a henge seal into his Maelstrom cloak. Embedding a pre-existing transformation parameter made it such that he didn't need to concentrate to maintain the illusion. He only needed to allow the fuin to absorb the chakra he subconsciously exuded. He didn't put it on his regular clothes because, well, he had fewer coats than, say, shirts, and was too lazy to place the arrays on so many articles of clothing. He also felt that there was a dramatic undertone when changing cloaks to swap identities. Hence, even if he felt like a slab of juicy, fat meat in the middle of a pack of starving wolves, he felt rather safe from being discovered. Gaining directions discreetly was impossible though, and once one person knew of his next destination, that instantly became the hottest topic on the rumor mill. Wondering when he suddenly became a Sasuke-lite, he thanked the proprietor of the shop he had entered quietly, before leaving the place as stealthily as he could. He would later find out that the man had recorded the conversation, and proceeded to sell it to various magazines and even a few ardent fans. It was quite the shock to see his hood appear on Sorcerer magazine, and a complete personality profile derived from him asking for directions. The directions were crude, but Naruto had enough to ascertain his route to the small town. The road was fairly worn, a winding path through the dense forests that grew so vigorously due to the rich soil. The journey would usually take people more than a day from the town he just left, but Naruto made it in 4 hours. It was already twilight by the time he reached Matsubara, which suited him just fine. Matsubara spanned the narrow entrance into a shallow basin that was flanked by a lake and empty himawari. The lake was likely the source of water for irrigating the extremely fertile soil of the basin. Given it was a predominantly agricultural peasant village, Naruto was greeted with tame wooden fences and thatched cottages. Naruto stopped before the suspiciously empty field of grass between the forest and the village, and climbed a tree. On first glance, Matsubara seemed peaceful and idyllic enough. Careful surveillance and observation told a different story. So that's how they avoided detection. Naruto nodded in approval, internally praising his foes. The mages were dressed in the same clothes as the farmers, pretending to be them. They spent their time meandering around town, but a short stakeout from a good vantage point showed Naruto there was some order to the movement of the villagers. There were a few shifts of patrolling guards, who ensured that no one could leave without notice easily. There was a gap between each set of guard patrols that would have allowed someone to sneak past, but the open field made it well nigh impossible for any non-mage. The lake was likely guarded by some magic. It appeared innocuously serene. With no other way to leave Matsubara besides go over the mountain, Naruto presumed the guards got lazy when the villager made it out of there. But with a small community like that one, it would be easy to spot missing people. It would also be easy to identify strangers. Naruto knew quite well how easily a nondescript look could completely make a person unnoticeable, but he didn't want to take that particular risk. Any fighting done in the village would probably tear all of it down. He had to find the guild master and take him out first, hopefully as quietly as he could. If the base of operations was not in the village, then all the better. He highly doubted the guild master, the wanted criminal Saturnos, would willingly live in squalor in order to maintain the village's image of peace. He also dabbled in other illegal jobs too, and they would need a place for people to approach without anyone finding out about Matsubara. The farming town was likely no more than bonus profit for Infernum. He wished he still had current information on all the dark guilds he gathered aggressively before he began his stint as Maelstrom. Due to his growing reputation and the copycat incident, plenty of dark guilds like Infernum went even further underground, and plenty more shifted their headquarters to evade him. His intel was rendered essentially useless, and while he was slowly collecting the data again, it was a slow process. He was also beset with other responsibilities, such as council missions and fairy tale obligations, and that restricted his free time greatly. Staying with Kana also had the side effect of having to dodge a clingy girl every time he needed to do something sensitive. He was on the verge of just ignoring the intelligence work, and just be a brainless point-at-enemy fire weapon for the council. With a formative plan in his mind, he hopped off the perch and landed on the forest ground softly. Focusing his chakra, Kurama appeared in a puff of smoke. The fox looked annoyed at being summoned. Naruto just shrugged. I need your help. You can't do your own transformation? Kurama sniffed haughtily, unhappy at being treated as a common animal. Why do you need me? Naruto rolled his eyes. Sorry for respecting your abilities as a magical fox, Kurama. Kurama merely grinned before he settled on his haunches to listen to Naruto's instructions. The Crimson Fox often pretended to be an adorable pet in the presence of everyone else in fairy tale. To compensate, the fox pretended to be all high and mighty when alone with Naruto. It was a phase the blonde man hoped his companion would leave soon. He knew it was all playful banter, but he had dealt with enough snootiness when he was teammates with Sasuke. He really didn't want to endure that kind of behavior from Kurama any longer. Beyond his idiosyncrasies, the fox had been a great help on plenty of missions for Naruto, both open and classified. He had attached a permanent Hiraishin seal on the canine, and given the two-way connectivity of his father's signature technique, he could easily summon Kurama like the toads he once relied upon. Teaching the fox transformation to turn its fur midnight black also helped muddy the potential connections people might draw between Maelstrom and Rafaga. No one could possibly mistake a black, horse-sized fox for a small crimson one. It helped that Kurama was savvy enough to never speak and use transformation or titan magic in front of fairy tale members, or even on legal missions, and he always made sure to transform into his alter ego when on classified ops. Which he did right then, even before Naruto asked. Naruto delivered his orders, and the fox bounded across the flat field, a mere shadow in the darkness. As he settled on a sturdy tree branch in view of the village and threw the Totan Jutsu over himself, Naruto resolved to treat Kurama to a big meal when they were done. He had a feeling it would take a while before the guards would return to headquarters. 8. You owe me a big meal after this, Kurama warned, as he prodded Naruto to wakefulness. Naruto yawned as he stretched out the kinks in his torso after sleeping in a tree for the night. Yeah, I got it. Lead the way. The fox displayed incredible dexterity as he hopped from branch to branch, before safely jumping to the ground. Naruto didn't bother. He just leapt straight down, cushioning the impact to his knees with a liberal amount of chakra. Kurama rolled his eyes at the showy action, but didn't stick a snarky comment in as he began a quick trot through the forest. Naruto followed the fox quietly, his companion still cloaked by transformation. The trees were getting progressively bare as they continued the journey, and by the time Kurama had slowed to a walk, there were only dead trunks left. It was a short, cautious walk before they arrived at the headquarters of Infernum. It was built into the side of the volcano, no doubt dug out by some earth magic expert, and protected by powerful enchantments. Naruto could only tell there was an anomaly there with his magnified senses, but couldn't see through the layers of magic that shielded the entrance from view. The trees around were chopped down as with those that probably once surrounded Matsubara, and it gave any defender a clear view of any intruders headed to the guild. Small guild my ass, Naruto muttered under his breath. To keep Matsubara under so efficiently, to hide their buildings so well, they definitely aren't pushovers. Kurama gestured at the dead trees all around them with his paw. Not sure what's happening here, but it reeks of death. Probably from experiments, Naruto groaned, recalling the kidnapped townsfolk, then the several villains from his world that sickened him to the core. I hate mad scientist types. Naruto scratched his cheek as he considered his options. There weren't too many, to be honest. He could try to infiltrate the guild headquarters, but he usually scouted a dark guild quite thoroughly before attempting to do so. His infiltrations had three types. He either slipped into the building incognito, pretended to want to join, or if he was going to wreak havoc, replace an existing member. However, all three forms of infiltration would require some preparation of varying levels, which included making sure of success from the get-go. Infiltration gigs got increasingly harder to pull off the more times they failed on a particular target. Given Naruto was here to destroy, he didn't see a great need to get in. He probably had enough power to blow their front doors down. Except, he shunned that sort of method ever since the war. Attacking head-on usually meant getting hit by some unknown trump card move that could wreck anyone's day. He had no idea the numbers of Infernum, the relative strength of their current members, and if they had any specialties. It was frustrating for his heart and mind to do battle over how to blow up a dark guild, and every minute he spent debating his methods was every minute more time for Infernum to spot him and go into high alert. Kurama solved that issue for him when the fox exploded in size, snarling viciously at the hidden entrance of the Infernum guild headquarters. Having an obsidian fox the size of a two-story house was enough to scare anyone into looser bowels, and that seemed to be the case as Kurama smashed his body against the fake, possibly illusory, rock formation that hid the doors without encountering any resistance from within the base. Shaking his head in exasperation, Naruto nevertheless joined in, his eyes shifting as he entered Senin Moto. Raising his hand into the air, it took a mere 3 seconds for Futon, Raisin Shuriken to form, and another for Naruto to shout a warning to Kurama before he hurled the powerful technique at the general location of the entrance. Allowing it to expand the moment it disappeared into the rock without a trace, the illusion flickered and disappeared, while the double doors were wrecked. Once imposing, ornate doors that stretched 3 stories high had a boulder-sized hole torn in the middle. With the gates teetering on the edge of collapse, Kurama rammed the doors once more. The weakened structural integrity of the doors meant it was no match for a giant animal crashing into it. Kurama stumbled into the cave, proclaiming his desire for blood in a blood-curdling roar. Naruto chuckled as he stepped through the blown doors sedately, blowing away all and any forms of attacks with a rotating dome of harsh gales. The spinning dome of wind chakra was inspired by the Hakusho Kaiten, and Naruto was sure Neji would be proud of his creation. He didn't even need to twirl on the spot to generate the shield. He just needed hand seals for his futon, Kaiten, and it would stay active for as long as he had chakra. He knew for certain that if Neji was still around, he would be exasperated by his lack of creativity with regards to the name, but glad to have been part of the clan to provide that idea to Naruto. As he watched a gout of fire burn its user after getting redirected back by his technique, he scratched his cheek in mild befuddlement. Are they really that weak? Once they had taken down all the members of Infernum, leaving them in collapsed heaps scattered around the entrance of the cave, they proceeded to charge down the cavern rashly. Naruto rode on Kurama's back, a hand gripping his neck fur rather firmly. Kurama wasn't a big fan of being a mount, but even the fox had to admit it was cool to make an entrance like that. Dashing towards the raised dais where a single man sat on a throne, sliding to a stop right in front of him and bearing gigantic teeth would turn plenty of men boneless. Credit to the Infernum Guild Master, he didn't flinch as Kurama roared at the top of his lungs in his face, the sound echoing through the cavernous guild headquarters. You are Maelstrom, Saturno seethed. How did you find us? Naruto peered down at the man, observing his adversary. The man was brown of hair, with dark eyes that glinted with madness. He was fairly good-looking, though the gaudy priest robes that he wore ruined that. The black garment had seen far better days. It was caked with loose dirt and dried blood, with plenty of rips at the bottom hem. A silver scythe was loosely held in his hands, with a long chain attached to the bottom. The chain snaked up his arm, wrapping the appendage securely. In the barely lit cavern that was Infernum's home, it was pretty much impossible to see anything else. The man's teeth gleamed sinisterly as he flashed a wicked grin at the hooded trespasser. That was a stupid question. It's the famous Maelstrom we're talking about. Saturnos gestured wildly, his eyes glowing. You are truly impressive. Surrender the kidnapped villagers, and come quietly, Naruto declared for the sake of appearances. He sorely wanted to bash the guy's face in, if only to wipe the maniacal grin of his face. Your entire guild has been defeated, and soon, there'll be rune knights swarming all over the area. I am on the cusp of an extraordinary discovery, the brown-haired man commented in mild irritation, as if the threat of incarceration meant nothing in his soon-to-succeed scheme. The sudden mood change startled Naruto. Is he bipolar? I have no time for games with you, Maelstrom. Go and disturb some other guild. Kurama had enough of waiting for action. With a loud howl, the massive black canine charged forwards, intent on smacking the dark guild master with his giant paw. To both his and Naruto's surprise, the man blocked the attack by merely raising his arm to meet the onrushing paw. Undeterred, Kurama reared back, and unleashed a large mouthful of white-hot flames that illuminated the entire cavern with its intensity. Naruto covered his eyes as the blaze peaked in intensity, before it was extinguished with the 2 walls of earth smothering it. Allowing the walls to crumble to dirt, Saturnos looked unruffled by the attacks. Kurama growled in fury, ready to attack the unperturbed guild master when Naruto patted the fox's head. That was helpful, Naruto remarked wryly, to which the obsidian-furred fox snorted. Let me off. The black fox grumbled under its breath, but acquiesced as he bent his forelegs, allowing Naruto to dismount. The ninja took a closer look at the scythe in Saturno's hand, marveling at the workmanship. There were runes etched into the silver blade of the weapon. Naruto surmised he had to stick to a longer range when fighting the guild master. Saturnos was less careful facing his enemy. Despite his assertion that he was more interested in completing whatever work he was doing, the man seemed eager to charge straight into battle. Naruto wished he could meet some normal villains next time, instead of crazy people like the man that stood before him, dressed as a priest, conducting experiments on humans and possibly bipolar. He must think he's the savior of the world, Naruto groaned, as Saturnos screamed some prayer, swiping at the hooded man wildly with his scythe. It was a pain to fight the man. The zealous attacks were wild and unpredictable, and given it was a scythe, it made it that much harder to anticipate. Naruto wondered if this was how others viewed him back when he was the most unpredictable ninja of Konoha. Even as he relied on his well-honed instincts to dodge an overhead swing, he couldn't take the various openings the man had in his unrefined stance. Saturno's offense was too quick for him to risk a hand jabbing at soft spots. The madman was giggling as he kept up the attack, keeping Naruto on the back foot and preventing him from doing anything but avoid the scythe Naruto knew had some special properties he'd rather not know of. Kurama sighed on the sidelines, watching the debacle with boredom. He wanted to fight, but it was not worth getting minor cuts all over his face or forelimbs. It would sting a lot. Naruto wished he had the kind of speed that Rock Lee had, as his movements grew more and more desperate. Saturno seemed to be gradually speeding up, while he became more and more lead-footed. Only his Senin Moto kept him unharmed, having afforded him better senses and reflexes. A flicker of movement in his peripheral vision caused Naruto to lose focus for a moment, and that earned him a small wound on his forearm as he raised it, reinforced with chakra, to block another overhead slice that would have lopped off an arm. Then Naruto's eyes widened in realization. He pulsed his chakra in a wave that expanded around him, blowing past Saturno's and Kurama. The image of Saturno's wavered, before shattering like brittle glass, leaving no evidence of his presence. Kurama shook his giant head woozily. Naruto's eyes gleamed with anticipation and respect as he heard the clanking of what was probably large machinery. He played us like fiddles. The runes on the scythe were for illusion magic. He retreated the moment we were caught in his illusion. The entire fight was faked, and it gave him time to prepare whatever trump card he has. I should have expected such a ploy after seeing the amazing illusory protection the doors had. I see you got out of the illusion. That's impressive. A voice congratulated on loudspeaker. I've never had someone break it so quickly before. I barely got into my Chronos in time. Naruto groaned internally as he saw the throne shattered by a massive mechanical hand, a giant monstrosity emerging from the gloom behind the throne. He leapt upon Kurama's back once more, and the fox enlarged his frame further, until Naruto could comfortably stand on his head. The large avatar was in the vague image of a man, with long, gangly limbs and a stout body. Saturnos was sitting in the middle of the torso, enclosed in thick armor. A small window allowed the man to see out of his machine, and Naruto to see the guild master seated within. The entire robot was covered in what appeared to be loose flaps of flesh, though in the darkness Naruto couldn't tell for sure. The grotesque thing also had a giant scythe, mimicking its pilot's weapon of choice. Die! The man screeched, his machine charging forward as it swung its weapon. There was barely any space available for two giants to engage in a melee battle, and that suited Naruto just fine. As Kurama scrambled backwards, Naruto created a Kage Bunshin. Applying chakra to his feet to hold on, the two Narutos flashed through different hand seals even as the original shouted. Fire! Kurama got the memo, as the giant fox inhaled deeply, gathering magic in his abdomen before exhaling a gigantic wave of white flames. One Naruto unleashed a huge spiraling blast of wind, while another's chest expanded before he spat out a torrent of extremely flammable oil. The triple combination turned the already intense fire into a blazing storm, completely filling the width of the cavern and engulfing Saturno's machine fully. His Kage Bunshin disappeared, its simple job done. The fire wasn't anywhere near dying out when a man, encased in a molten armor of earth, burst out of the fiery depths, screaming bloody murder. Saturnos reached forwards, his hand aiming to rip Naruto's head off as his eyes glowed with stark madness. Naruto cocked a fist back, and smashed it into the slag that made up Saturno's armor. He wasn't quick enough, however, to prevent the man's hand from grabbing his hood. Sending the Dark Guild Master careening backwards also resulted in his cloak ripping. As his henge collapsed, Naruto unleashed another gout of flames from his mouth to prevent Saturnos from seeing his face. The crazed mage fell back into the massive blaze that was still roaring, screaming death threats as he disappeared into the bright flames. The conflagration seemed to be the perfect method of annihilation for the guild that called itself Infernum. Naruto wished he were a bit more careful about collateral damage though, as he now had a massive grease fire to put out. Combining a fire with oil was extremely effective. The slick liquid stuck to all surfaces, spread easily, and the resulting fire couldn't be put out with water. Removing all the oxygen in the atmosphere was usually the best method to extinguish a grease fire. For Naruto, he had a simpler and far more effective method. Retrieving a pre-made scroll, he unfurled the paper to expose a few in array. He flashed through the prerequisite hand seals. Moments later, a blue vapor extended from the scroll, and floated towards the inferno. It enveloped the blaze, and pulled it into the scroll slowly, the fire seemingly sucked into the flimsy piece of paper. Bit by bit, the fires disappeared, and when all but the oil was gone, the symbol for fire appeared in the empty center of the array, signifying a successful sealing. Fukahoin, success, Naruto announced, hopping off Kurama's head. He made sure to insulate his feet with chakra against the boiling hot oil as he trudged over to the smoking body of Saturnos. He was groaning in his unconscious state, the earthen armor sloughing off his blistering skin in trickles of molten rock. He was lucky he wasn't left to stew in the oil any longer. His machine was already slag, a steaming pool of unidentifiable metals. Chains sprouted from Naruto's back and wrapped around the prone guild master, lifting him off the pool of oil. Forming a clone, he sent it deeper into the guild headquarters, just to see what he hadn't destroyed with his reckless use of fire. Come on, Kurama, let's get the hell out of here, Naruto said, the fox grunting his approval. 888888888888888. It was impossible to save any of the kidnapped villagers. A quick study of Saturno's notes told Naruto they were doing gene modification experiments. The victims were too damaged by the inhumane trials to be rescued. All of them were malformed terribly, twisted growths and crippling deformations littering their bodies. It was easier for them to be released from that state than to try and live out the rest of a painful, likely short existence. Naruto ended their lives quickly, his eyes misting up at the dirty work he had to do. Then, he planted exploding notes all over the laboratory, spreading them out evenly to ensure its collapse and the subsequent destruction of the data. The world didn't need someone finding the results of the experimentation and repeating them. Once his job was done, the Kagebunshin dispelled. Outside, Naruto had settled Saturnos against a tree. A horde of Kagebunshin, along with the help of Kurama, carried the rest of the Infernum Guild members out of their headquarters. They efficiently bound the criminals with ninja wire, and left them leaning against the dead trees of the forest outside the cave. Naruto briefly thought about discovering the cause of the trees dying around them. The gene experiments wouldn't cause trees outside to wither, but he decided destroying the cavern would crush the source of death as well, so he ignored the curiosity, and remotely ignited the explosive tags. A dull boom echoed through the guild hideout, and the mountain rumbled as the cave collapsed. Naruto shut his eyes, praying the volcano didn't erupt. When it stayed silent for 5 minutes, the blonde heaved an uneasy sigh of relief. Kurama snorted as he prodded the unconscious man's head with his nose, making sure the man was still knocked out. The jet-black fox glanced around him, noting the mass of defeated mages lying around. He grinned at the job well done, letting out a garish howl that echoed through the dead forest. Patting the giant fox on its shoulder, Naruto watched as Kurama shrunk in size until he could once more fit comfortably in Kana's lap. Then, the fox's fur shifted colors, lightening into a shiny coat of crimson. Suddenly, the animal stiffened, and took 2 cautious sniffs of the air. "There's someone watching us," the fox barked out a warning. Naruto nodded curtly, pinching the bridge of his nose in frustration as he called out into the empty forest. He couldn't believe he was blown so easily, by pure coincidence, no less. "I know. You can come out now, Gildarts." The S-class mage sheepishly stepped out from behind a gnarled tree, an easy smile perched on his face. Even so, Naruto could sense the unease and wariness the older man was exuding. Gildarts waved his hand around, gesturing at the dead forest they were standing in. "What brings you here, Rafaga?" Gildarts asked curiously, his armored gauntlets clanking against his steel waist guard as he lowered his hand. "This isn't a place for mages like you." Naruto sighed in vexation, glancing at the master of a dark guild he had secured against a tree with sturdy metallic wires, and further bound by the chains that emerged from his spine. He wondered if he could lie to Gildarts convincingly enough. He abandoned that thought moments later. Gildarts was far from stupid, and Naruto wasn't sure he could take Gildarts on if they eventually came to blows. "I could ask you the same question. Are you heading back to Fairy Tail already? You really are Fairy Tail's ace. An SS rank mission completed in a year when others take a decade." "Don't change the subject," Gildarts warned, his tone darkening. The dry earth beneath his feet cracked as the man unleashed a small portion of his full magical power. "This is the stomping ground for Infernum, a dark guild. That man you have wrapped up there is a supposed S-class mage, Infernum's guild master Saturnos. You don't even have a scratch on you. That's impossible for a mage of your supposed strength, to defeat this whole guild on your own." "I guess it is, even though he's really just barely A-class," Naruto replied noncommittally. "Look, we all have our secrets. Makarov trusts me. Isn't that enough?" Gildarts released his full magical power. The white aura of his magic roared around his body as the ground shattered, leaving him standing in a large crater. Naruto was unfazed as he stared down the senior mage of Fairy Tail, while his face was masked. Gildarts could see from his calm azure eyes that he was completely unperturbed by Gildarts' show of strength. The fox was similarly unruffled, only growling softly in response. The man reined in his crushing magic soon after, allowing the unconscious mages in the area to breathe properly once again. He wanted to threaten the man he knew as Rafaga, but not at the cost of someone's life. "The only men in Fairy Tail who aren't crushed by my full power are Makarov and Ivan," Gildarts remarked, his eyes narrowing in deep suspicion. "Out with it. Who are you and what do you really want? Do you mean any harm to the guild? Are you misleading Kana-chan?" "Don't worry, I mean no harm to Fairy Tail. It's my new home, and I don't intend to let it down like I did before," Naruto answered gingerly, pursing his lips. "I'm just not used to displaying my strength. It was essential for me to keep everything hidden before, and it's a habit now. It helps to make my opponents underestimate me." "Does Makarov know of all this?" Gildarts waved his hand around, annoyed at having an unknown, powerful person working in the shadows in the name of Fairy Tail. Naruto shook his head in the negative, raising his open palms up towards Gildarts to indicate his goodwill. "Don't get hasty. He just closes both eyes, and lets me work quietly. This isn't done on his orders, but nobody said not to take out the trash. That's why Fairy Tail is getting more and more S-rank missions," Gildarts murmured thoughtfully, stroking his stubble. "While I admire your dedication to establishing peace in Fiori, your methods need a long rethink. Legal guilds don't get involved in dirty jobs." "I'm not the face of Fairy Tail, you are," Naruto countered indignantly. "And my methods are not dirty. They are just less appreciated. Even Makarov admits the need for spies." Gildarts frowned severely, walking towards Naruto. The blonde man held his ground as his fellow guild member stood before him, glaring down at the shorter mage. These missions are unsanctioned. And spies? This isn't spying. This is elimination. It's not your decision to take out these dark guilds. You are painting a terrible picture of Fairy Tail to the council. The reason for Fairy Tail's influx of S-rank missions is because of our rising reputation and you, not me. No one on the Magic Council knows me. Heck, this mission is from the council, just that it's classified. They only know me as the independent mage Maelstrom. Yajima Dano is actually the only one on the council who knows my affiliation to Fairy Tail, and he hasn't leaked that to his fellow councilmen, Naruto replied dispassionately, nonplussed by Gildarts' accusatory tone. He just tells them that I'm loyal to him and the council's cause. I've been working for the council for more than a year, doing secret missions to stake out, and sometimes take out small dark guilds like Infernum. They trust me fully, and don't even bother questioning me about my identity anymore. So you're the infamous Maelstrom, huh? Gildarts grunted, remembering how impressed he had been when he had heard of that mage's record and his deeds. There was no room for the appreciation of past achievements when it came to the safety of his guild, however. The imposing Fairy Tail Ace's face contorted into a fierce scowl as he squeezed Naruto's shoulder painfully. I'm watching you, Rafaga. As much as I enjoy drinking and brawling with you, I won't hesitate to cut you down if you so much as lay a hand on any Fairy Tail member. Relax, you'll get more wrinkles if you keep frowning like that, Naruto grunted, slapping Gildarts' hand away. The serious conversation was effectively over with those words. Gildarts was willing to give him the benefit of the doubt. Let's go get drunk. I'm sick of this tense atmosphere. Gildarts' eyes brightened as he grabbed Naruto by his shoulders and dragged his fellow Fairy Tail mage towards the nearest town, a wide grin plastered on his face. Fine, you're treating, you sneaky little bastard. What? You're the S-class mage who just finished an SS rank mission? Naruto cried, even as he shifted his feet to keep pace with the chortling Gildarts. You're the one with the money. Kurama looked around at the mages of Infernum, then at the disappearing backs of the Fairy Tail mages. Sighing, he broke into a run to catch up. Whatever. The Rune Knights can find their own way here. The fox paused. I hope. 888888888888888. The beady black eye of a raven watched as dozens of Rune Knights scattered themselves around the dead forest, picking up secured prisoners and preparing them for incarceration. The raven stayed on its perch patiently, eyes flicking over every movement of every knight. When they had left after nearly a full day of work, the raven trained its eyes on the rubble that blocked the collapsed guild headquarters of Infernum. With a loud caw and a quick flap of its wings, it took off, leaving behind only a single black feather. Chapter 4 Mistigan, Act 777. Kana always thought her adoptive brother was kind of weird. She loved him, really. He was smart, caring, and really powerful, even though he never advertised his strength. But his obsession with hiding his face was something that always irked Kana in a nonviolent way. She had tried ways and means to force him to reveal his real face, from aiming at his face when sparring to stalking him in the bathroom. He always managed to cover his look still. Using a towel in the bath, an illusion when eating, and even his blanket drawn up to his nose when he slept. Kana's attempts to sneak into his room and either expose him or destroy his masks always met with failure too. He had an uncanny ability to wake up whenever a devious plan struck Kana, and she was always foiled. That also proved to Kana that her Rafa was hiding his skills. She was a strong mage for her age, and in the guild, she was already touted as one of those who had the potential to hit S-class. It also helped that Rafaga worked with her on her card magic, developing combinations and techniques that often left Kana demanding him to just show her the move instead of explaining all his technical jargon to her. For him to know so much about her card magic despite being a B-class mage left Kana very suspicious. He was a hair and chain magic user that was supposedly terrible at everything else, even the basic transformation. For him to understand card magic's intricacies meant he knew a lot more than he let on. Often, he would be gone for weeks on C or B rank missions when they would take mere days. When he returned, he always brought home some new cards for her, appeasing her ire for his long absence, which she likened to Gildarts' tendency to be away. Kana supposed it was a ploy to distract her from his long disappearances. But she was 11, and she wasn't that naive anymore. Any questioning was deflected with surprising ease. Kana persisted with invasive queries about his activities before she heard sobbing behind his door one night. It was a heart-wrenching sound, something Kana would never have associated with Rafaga before. He always seemed so collected, so impervious to emotional breakdown. After that incident, she decided to respect his privacy. That said, she desperately wanted to know when Gildarts and her Rafa got so chummy. A year ago, they started to seek each other out for drinking company, and along with Wakaba and Macau, made up the Old Men Gang, as Gray so eloquently called them. Of course, there were other members just as old as them, but they weren't always hanging out together like the four invariably did, when Gildarts or Rafaga were in town, at any rate. She often wondered if it was the alcohol that brought her blood father and adoptive brother together as friends. Kana was thus inspired. She had been forbidden from alcohol by her Rafa but she was planning to try soon enough. She just wondered when she would be reasonably sneaky enough to grab some beer from the guild's bar without his notice. Beyond all of the mysteries that surrounded her Rafa she found herself enjoying her time with Gray. He was a cool guy, and bar her mild amusement at his stripping problem, they got along well. Urza was still as aloof as when she first stepped into the guild, but recently she had begun to open up. Kana supposed it was the constant challenges from Gray, or her disapproval of Kana's newfound desire to try alcohol. Laxus was building his own gang, which meant the three of them usually teamed up on missions. Kana had pestered Naruto about going on missions with him too, but he was steadfast in refusing her requests. Sure, sometimes he took her out on C-rank missions for some pocket change, but beyond those, he was adamant she couldn't come with him. Even though Rafaga had refused to allow Kana to pay rent, she managed to push him into accepting some jewels from her for housekeeping. It gave her a sense of satisfaction at having contributed to their household, and it kept Rafaga from going on more missions using money as an excuse. She didn't see why he was so enthusiastic about saving up money though. She managed to peek into his bankbook once, and was astounded by the amount of money he had stored up. It seemed somewhat impossible given the type of missions he had gone on, but she guessed he must have done more than she thought. He must have spent quite a bit of the money already too, given as Kana had seen his stash of equipment in the attic. She surmised even Urza would have been hard-pressed to say no to the high-quality steel that Rafaga kept in their home. The weapons were all of weird construction though. They were nothing like the type that she had spotted in the shop Urza usually shopped at for her equipment. There were throwing stars, knives, and a vast number of tri-pronged daggers, each with a piece of paper wrapped around the handle. There was also a huge sword larger than even her, and she reckoned it was as long from hilt to tip as Rafa and I, who was no slouch in the height department. That one, she didn't think even Urza could use properly. When Kana asked about the weapons, Rafaga promised to let her use them if she was willing to learn, and so she learned the art of shuriken jutsu, which she put to good use with a deck of throwing cards Rafaga presented to her. He gifted her one of the tri-pronged weapons he called a kunai, and told her to keep it on her at all times. It wasn't a very special gift given he had hundreds of them, but it was a present from her Rafa and I nonetheless. He told her that when she was in danger, she just needed to throw the knife and he would be there. Skeptical, she assumed it was a metaphorical thing older people like to say, and put the knife in her card bag with the rest of her deck. All in all, she found the last 3 years staying with Rafaga to be some of the best in her short life. She only hoped it could continue, and that people would stop treating her like a kid. She deserved to know stuff too, damn it. 888888888888888. Naruto's eyes glazed over a little as his Kage Bunshin in Era informed him of a new mission via telepathy. He was glad to have picked up that particular skill. It saved him a lot of trouble forming and dispelling clones for sending messages to and fro. Once he had taken note of the mission specifics, he excused himself from the lunch table, headed over to the mission request board. Nab was already standing there, the teenager pondering endlessly about which mission to take. Peering at the various papers tacked to the board, Naruto grunted and grabbed one that involved eliminating monsters that were attacking a town in the mountains. Spotting an easy D rank, he snagged that, and stuffed it into the protesting Nab's hands. Waving goodbye to Wakaba and the cow, and kissing an embarrassed Kana's forehead, he left the guild headquarters. Kurama was held tightly in Kana's arms, the fox desiring a bit of rest time for that day. Once he was certain no one could spot him, he slipped into an alley. As he focused his senses, the Hiraishin seals on his various kunai called out to him like bright signal flares. Given the Hiraishin no jutsu was a space-time technique, time and distance had barely any significant impact. Ignoring all the other Hiraishin markers he had planted everywhere, including on Kana, but she wasn't to know of the invisible seal on her back. He concentrated on the one in Era. With no disturbance but a light whoosh, the blonde man disappeared, leaving behind nothing in his wake. Reappearing in the middle of a modest apartment, Naruto greeted his clone casually. The doppelganger nodded before dispelling, leaving all of his memories with Naruto. The blonde man had rented a small apartment in Era as the missions from the council stacked up, and there was a need for him to be nearby more often. He usually posted a Kage Bunshin there to collect the missions from Yajima's desk. The apartment was for convenience of travel between Magnolia town and Era, allowing Naruto to avoid the Rune Knights at the gates via Hiraishin. He was amused to learn of the additional workload the Rune Knights commanders forced their men into, still in the belief that Naruto entered Era via the main entrance. As he whistled at the high reward for the mission, a whooping 10 million jewels, he briefly wondered if Kana was aware of his secret activities. Over the past 3 years, he had been slowly unveiling more and more of his clandestine life by leaving small clues here and there. He could easily just create a Kage Bunshin to replace him whenever he was out on a council mission or another infiltration gig, but he chose not to. He could tell Kana was suspicious, but she never wavered in her trust of him. He felt dirty, to omit the truth from, then try to manipulate a girl towards the facts. He was sure in the next few years, Kana would be smart enough to note that his finances didn't check out. He had deliberately funneled all his money, through various dummy names, into one account, and left the bank book out for her to see. He hoped that on the day she confronted him on his activities, he could be completely honest, and she could accept him in spite of his flaws and his secret life. He didn't think he could stay on in Fairy Tail if she couldn't embrace the intent behind his actions. He knew he could count on Gildarts and Makarov's support, but that was not enough in the family that was Fairy Tail. Family didn't keep each other in the dark. He had already made preparations for leaving the guild if there was ever a need, Money had not been an issue as the amount of work picked up, and that money would solve most problems. The hole he had dug for himself grew bigger and bigger every day, as Makarov always reminded him, but he was mentally ready to fall into the pit right from the beginning. He frowned minutely as he mentally reviewed the Horatian tags he had planted. He had no Horatian tags in the area where he was supposed to go for his missions, but that was easily taken care of by just teleporting to the nearest one, and traveling from there. He estimated himself to have covered over 60% of Fiori towns with his tags by now. He hoped there wouldn't be some sort of karmic backlash from abusing the technique. His father was a real genius for inventing it. As he disappeared without a sign, his clone slouched on the couch and pulled out a sorcerer magazine to read. There was nothing better to do anyway. Naruto grunted as he slid the bloody blade from the body of the last creature, the thick, coagulating blood flowing off his sword in rivulets. There were dozens of the forest green, scaled reptilian monsters that resembled giant snakes with legs. He didn't even know what they were called. He wasn't too concerned about the monsters that lurked in Fiori Wilderness when he arrived in Earthland. It didn't really matter to him anyway. Nothing bar a dragon would pose any sort of threat to him. Hefting Kubikuribocho on his shoulder, he left the corpses of the creatures to feed scavengers as he approached the town for his mission reward. Using Kubikuribocho was a new thing for him. He had initially taken the weapon as a sign of respect to Zabuza. He had heard of how Sujetsu took it from the man's grave, and afterwards, Kabuto handed it to Edo Tensei Zabuza. Kakashi handled it for a bit, then it came into Naruto's hands. There was no way he would just pass it on to some unworthy person, and thus held on to the massive cleaver until he could find a successor. However, things went to hell and stayed that way, and Naruto didn't even realize he was carrying the weapon in a scroll until he was in Earthland and doing some inventorying. He wasn't particularly eager to use the weapon, given he was no Kenjutsu specialist, but as time went by, he felt Zabuza would be quite annoyed if his beloved Danto wasn't put to good use. Given it was a massive beast of a weapon, there was only one real way to use it. Naruto didn't see the need to learn kendo or any specific sword skills. He needed brute strength, and his reflexes would take care of everything else. If he planted a Horatian seal on something, it was almost guaranteed dead with Kubikuribocho. It was a weapon for bloodthirsty killing, however, and even the ability of absorbing iron to repair itself alluded to the undeniable fact. Hence, he usually only used it for things he didn't mind killing. Like monsters terrorizing a small town, for example. Making sure he was in his usual Rafaga outfit, he collected the reward from the grateful townsfolk, earning an appreciative smile from the chieftain's pretty daughter. He guessed if he was exuding killing intent, then the bloody sword on his shoulder would look far more imposing than it did then. He tossed the gigantic weapon into a handy storage seal on his right wrist, and casually asked for directions. Thanking the chieftain, he headed for his true destination, a small community that lived near the edge of Worth Woodsea, north of the mountain range he was currently in. They had reported an alarming number of people disappearing in the night, and recently, some had just vanished in midday. The place was experiencing some freak weather patterns as well, with large storms constantly hovering over their small village. Taking off at ninja speed, it took him a mere hour to cover the distance. Even from afar, he could see the large swirling storm situated above the village. It was strangely localized, however, which only added to Naruto's suspicion. Sure, the climate did support a few rainy days here and there, but it should be nowhere as intense as it seemed. Furthermore, the clouds were centered on the village, and nowhere close to the scale of a real thunderstorm. He had heard of localized rain before, but for it to be so small yet so intense was a serious cause for concern. Ditching his crimson coat and donning his Maelstrom one, his looks immediately changed to that of a brown-haired, emerald-eyed man, without the distinctive whisker marks on his face. It was a detail no one knew of him due to his mask, but he knew the value of caution. His braided hair bounced off his back in an uncomfortable way until he tossed it around his neck, and hooked the hood over his head. Satisfied that he looked like his alter ego, he pulled up his sleeve. Tapping a small seal on his left wrist, he armed himself with a Horatian kunai. He took nonchalant aim, and hurled the weapon as hard as he could. The throwing knife sliced through the air at speeds far beyond what most people can throw them at, and at the apex of its flight, it found itself in Naruto's hand once more. One would think a man in midair would plummet to his death quite quickly. That wasn't exactly the case for Naruto, however. His mastery over wind had improved by leaps and bounds since he had arrived in Earthland. He had managed to find some quality training and innovation time. Continuous spiraling jets of wind billowed from his feet, keeping him afloat. It was no substitute for actual flight. Naruto had no idea how to accomplish that yet, but hovering in midair looked cool in his opinion, and it worked a treat when intimidating dark mages who were frightened out of their skin just to hear Maelstrom was hunting them. The village wasn't too far away, but Naruto wasn't about to risk his ass diving into the storm and trying to end it like he would have 5 years ago. Instead, he merely observed the crazy phenomenon that looked increasingly man-made. There was no way a storm cloud would just materialize above the town. If questioned, Naruto would hazard a guess and say the dark cloud, which was shaped like an upside-down funnel opening, was sucking people up and some mad scientist was using those people for experiments. Naruto didn't have high opinions on scientists or their experiments, not after what he had seen from Orochimaru and the Dark Guild Infernum. Slipping into Sennin Moto, he expanded his senses to better study the strange storm. All of a sudden, the cloud spiraled inwards, shrinking until it disappeared without a whisper. With his enhanced vision, he could spot people rejoicing over the disappearance of the aggravating weather pattern. Everything seemed to be returning to normal, but Naruto's senses told him otherwise. There had been another presence, one that used its magic to nullify the swirling cloud. There were other forces at work here, forces Naruto was keen to uncover and hopefully prevent something like that from happening again. His mind honing in on the signature of the mage in question, the currently brown-haired man tossed his weapon in that direction. The Hiratian kunai flew unerringly true, and while it didn't make it all the way to the mysterious person, it allowed Naruto to get close enough. The mage was surprised to see that it was not some crazy old man, nor a mad scientist, but a young boy holding onto a wooden staff. He had a messy mop of striking blue hair, what looked like a tribal tattoo around his right eye, and a large backpack hung on his shoulders. He was dressed in a simple shirt and shorts, but looked far too wary of his surroundings to be anything less than a mage in training. Naruto scratched his chin, pondering his options even as he tailed the boy carefully. He supposed he could approach him as Maelstrom, and demand some answers. However, judging by the looks on the young mage, he didn't seem too likely to divulge his secrets. He realized he was starting to think like Makarov when he considered reaching out to the blue-haired child as Rafaga, and invite him back to Fairy Tail. The kid would need some support doing whatever it is he was doing, and Fairy Tail was one of the most accepting guilds in Fiori. Man, now I'm helping Makarov pick up strays. What's next? I become the 4th guild master? Swapping cloaks quickly was now an invaluable skill of his, and once he had his usual look, deactivating Sennin Moto as he did so, he hopped off the branch he was perched on, and landed behind the boy, crunching several leaves under his feet. As he expected, the boy whirled around, staff already held in a defensive posture. Naruto held his hands up high, indicating his desire for nonviolence. Unconvinced, the kid aimed the tip of the needle-shaped staff at Naruto, a deep scowl adorning his face. What do you want? The boy growled threateningly. Naruto smiled behind his mask. He doesn't look like a bad one. I saw your handiwork, helping that village. Care to explain? It's none of your business, the boy scoffed, putting his staff back on his back, turned back around and started walking once again. Gotta teach him not to be so trusting, to show his back to a stranger like that, Naruto mused, as he fell in step with the boy. I can help you with whatever it is you're doing, you know. You're just a kid. You don't have to shoulder all the responsibility that you're carrying right now. It's a family matter, the boy responded carefully. So I would appreciate if you didn't meddle in this business. Naruto frowned. He could tell the boy wasn't lying, but the answer was as vague and evasive as they came. I think I have a right to know when that thing sucked up some innocent civilians of the village. I'm a citizen of Fiori, and I'm frankly quite worried when it will be my turn to be sucked away from my home. The boy paused in his step, casting an uneasy gaze at Naruto. The blond man stared back, almost beseeching the young mage to accept the offered aid. Biting his lip, he broke the stare. Will you really help me? This isn't your problem, you know, and it shouldn't be the problem of a young man your age either, Naruto retorted mildly. So, what is the issue then? The boy stared at the clear sky, sighing rather forlornly for a child who ought to be enjoying his youth. I'm not from Earthland. I'm from Idolas, a parallel dimension. And? Naruto cocked an eyebrow, earning a befuddled glance from the blue-haired boy. What do you mean? Aren't you at least a bit shocked by that revelation? The boy inquired, looking far more bewildered despite being the one with more information on hand. Naruto shrugged nonchalantly. I know of someone who came to Earthland from Idolas, but that's unimportant. Continue with your story. Casting a suspicious look at Naruto, the staff-wielding boy nevertheless did. Our land has limited magic, while Earthland has unlimited magic. My father created the anima, to collect people with magical power, and turn them into lacrima crystals so we can utilize that magic. And you decided it was something you couldn't watch your father do, consigning people of Earthland to die to replenish Idola's magic? Naruto inferred, to which the boy nodded. Wait, you said your father created anima if Idolas needed magic, and your father is in charge of collecting it. Is he some sort of important figure in Idolas? Head scientist? King's advisor? The boy shook his head rather miserably. He's the king of Idolas. You're a prince, Naruto deadpanned, shaking his own head in disbelief. Who risked life and limb to come to Earthland to protect us from your father's schemes. In a way, the boy flinched. Naruto groaned as he realized what it all meant. You're going to have to hide your identity here, right? Idolas is a parallel dimension, which means there's an alternate you of Earthland. You definitely need my help, kiddo. There's no way you can go walking around, countering those things the way you are now. And I suppose you have a plan for that? The boy glowered. Naruto nodded at the rhetorical taunt, to the boy's incredulity. Well, I shouldn't be saying this at all, but given you are even more in need of anonymity, I'm actually using a false name right now. To be more exact, I have at least 5 identities running about in various guises, without anyone suspecting a thing. Does that reassure you of my capabilities? That sounds reassuring in a very twisted way, the boy replied, looking a bit frightened. Naruto chuckled weakly. Look, I'm just doing some on-the-side work here and there, with a bit of spying and espionage thrown in for good measure. And because of that, I deemed it rather important to keep my real identity secret. Not even my guild members know of my alter egos besides the guild master and the ace, and even the information they have is limited. I'm not doing it for my own profit. As for why I'm confiding in you, well, you're going to face similar issues trying to hide your real self from people whom you consider family. I just thought it would make it easier for you if you knew there was someone you can confide in. I should know. I was desperate for a confidant when I began my work. Okay, the blue-haired mage smiled softly, convinced. I'm Jalal, son of Faust, Prince of Idolas. You are? Naruto's eyes widened at the name. Wait. Jalal? Oh balls, that just complicated things by a lot. You'll have to hide your face and hair from everyone in Fairy Tail besides the guild master and myself. This is going to be tough. Is there something wrong? The boy panicked slightly. Is Jalal of Earthland an enemy of your guild? No, but he has a deep history with one of our newer members, Urza Scarlet, Naruto sighed. It's not my place to tell her story, and I only have second-hand accounts from the guild master anyway. You'll just have to be even more thorough with your disguise then. Oh, the boy sighed, relief flooding his veins. Naruto ruffled his hair playfully. Well, I'm Uzumaki Naruto. In Fairy Tail though, you'll have to refer to me as Rafaga Rimolino. It's nice to meet you, Uzumaki-san, the boy grinned cheerfully. I hope to learn many things from you. Likewise, Naruto smiled, though his mind was far away by then. Dimensional travel, huh? 8. Rabal smiled wistfully as he watched little Wendy Marvel interact with his guild members cheerfully, brightening up everyone's day with her sweet demeanor. He certainly didn't regret doing what he did, to provide Wendy with a home she could call her own for as long as she needed. However, that didn't mean he forgot his true purpose. Are you after Nirvana? From the shadows behind him, a voice chuckled. No, though I suppose my method of approach must have made you quite suspicious of me, Rabal. You know my name? The elderly mage croaked, a tad surprised. The young boy who brought Wendy here told me, Naruto replied, emerging from the tent to stand beside Rabal. A handy illusion masked his presence beside the older man, preventing Wendy from noticing him. You are quite the special mage, old man. To think, conjuring an entire guild of spirits, all to fulfill a little girl's dream. Rabal, stupefied, stared at the tall man beside him. Naruto's eyes, lined with red markings around his toad-like eyes, smiled back. I can detect life force, and I don't sense a hint of it around this guild except for little Wendy over there. You're a spirit too, are you not? Your magic is incredible. Rabal sighed sorrowfully. Yes. I died about 400 years ago. When Wendy asked me if I was a guild master, I couldn't deny her request to join a guild. These are all illusions, but they are based on my former tribesmen. You won't tell her, right? No. I'm only fulfilling the request of the boy who brought her here. Naruto crossed his arms. I'm just watching out for her. I don't think she can join the guild he's joining though. She knows his real name, and that cannot be allowed to leak out. Will you take care of her? Of course, without question, Rabal nodded firmly. Kate's shelter will be her loving home until she grows old enough to leave. Even for such a peaceful world, it's still built on lies, Naruto murmured, staring intently at his gloved hands. He composed himself soon after, his gaze never wavering from the raven-haired child named Wendy. I'll leave her in your care. Don't mind me if I drop by once in a while to check on her. Do as you will, Rabal responded. It's not like I can stop a mage of your caliber while I'm a spirit, after all. The man disappeared in a puff of smoke before Rabal could finish his words, but the elderly mage knew the blonde man had received the message anyway. 8. Rafaga, you have got to stop sneaking into my room like this, Makarov groaned, as he shut his door. It's wrong on so many levels. Shut it, you old coot, Naruto snapped, unhappy about the guild master's dig at his sexuality. The guild master had been harping about relationships in the last few months, and enjoying insinuating that he was gay. He was straight, damn it, just because he didn't, and couldn't, have a girlfriend. Look, I got you a new recruit. Mistigan, meet Makarov Dreyer. Old man, meet Mistigan. Makarov cocked an eyebrow as he studied the young boy in front of him. The boy had a bandana around his head, obscuring his hair from view. A metal plate was affixed to the bandana, protecting the forehead. A green piece of cloth was wrapped around his face, allowing only the eyes to be seen. The rest of his clothes were more in line with what children of his age would wear, a black shirt and white shorts. A wooden staff longer than the boy was tall was strapped to his back. Makarov also spied a brown backpack on his floor behind them. Where did you find your mini-me? Makarov sighed. Please, Mistigan, don't be frightened to show your entire face in Fairy Tail, unlike that idiotic man behind you. Naruto turned his head to the side, whistling. The boy shook his head, even as he removed his headgear. I'm sorry, but I cannot, Master Makarov. I am from Idolas, and I hear from Uzumaki-san that a girl named Urza Scarlet has a rocky past with the earthland version of me. Makarov could only gape at the sight of the blue-haired boy before him, looking rather apologetic. Rafaga, what the hell? Look, he's here for some very important work that only he can do, and I'm going to help him with. It also means you can call me Naruto in front of him, Naruto answered. It was true, only Migan could close Onimus with his idola's made equipment. Naruto could, and was going to, make one to mimic the staff's abilities, but that would take a long while. So just let him into the guild already. Aren't you the one who's always picking up strays anyway? I noticed you found a dragon slayer for our guild. Wendy's a dragon slayer too, Migan mumbled, as he fiddled with the bandana in his hand. Maybe she should join Fairy Tail after all? She's safe at Kate's shelter. Naruto denied the request, as much as he would like to do the same, and it'll be easier for you to maintain your disguise without her to smell you out. So, what about it, Makarov? He's a brilliant little mage, and mature as heck for his age. A bit too much like Urza, if you asked me. Fine, but you're going to be in charge of him. That includes teaching him life skills and whatnot, Makarov grunted, waving his hand dismissively. Now get out of my room, unless you want to see my wrinkly butt again, like that night when you sneaked into my room? Migan gagged at the implications of the guild master's words, as Naruto seethed at the cheeky wink Makarov sent at him. Stop putting weird ideas in others' heads, you old bastard. Chapter 5, Ivan, X778. Makarov placed his hands in a steeple as he looked at the two mages that stood before him in his office. One of them looked rather serious, as befitting the situation. The other looked positively giddy at the potential carnage that would occur in short order. Sighing, he grabbed an official parchment off his desk, handing it over to the senior mage in the temporary partnership. This is a mission from the Magic Council to do a takedown on a small dark guild, Corazon Oscuro. I'm not sure why this is assigned to us, and why we're not teaming up with other legal guilds to perform this duty. But these are orders from the top. Everyone else is unavailable, hence only the two of you will go. This will be a piece of cake, Makarov, Ivan Dreyer boasted, barely glancing through the letter before tossing it to Uzumaki Naruto. I don't even need Rafage-chan on this one. Makarov shook his head, sending a worried gaze at the silently reading Naruto. No. As small as they might seem, they are still a dark guild. Some support will be good, even essential. You will need someone to cover your back. Dark guilds don't fight clean like we do. Faye, I'll show them their place with my Shikigami-chan, Ivan grinned maliciously. The blonde man standing beside him handed back the mission slip to Makarov, nodding tersely at his guild master. I think it won't be an issue with a powerful S-class mage like Ivan on our side. Makarov caught the message between the lines. Corazon Oscuro will not be able to expose me before Ivan. Leaning back into his high-backed chair, Makarov gave them an encouraging smile. Bring glory back to Fairy Tail, 8. Metallic wheels screeched as slowly, the large locomotive rolled into motion, carrying with it passengers and luggage. In a near-empty carriage, there sat two men facing each other. One of them had a mischievous grin plastered on his face, while the other had his features obscured by a cloth mask. Even so, his cerulean eyes were expressive enough to convey his thinly veiled disdain for the tall, tan man sitting across of him. The dark-haired man was unfazed, and only seemed to find his companion rather amusing for carrying disgust at him. How should we do this, Ivan? Naruto asked politely. Rafage-chan, don't be so serious. Ivan mocked playfully. You'll make me lose my good mood. The blonde man stared out of the window at the shifting views, cradling his cheek in his hand. We're facing a dark guild, and I'm not an S-class mage as strong as you, Ivan. I think I'm entitled to feel a little uneasy about the situation. Ivan cackled as if Naruto had cracked a particularly funny joke. Does Rafage-chan need Ivan's protection? Don't worry about a thing. Ivan's Shikigami-chan will take care of all the bad guys for poor little B-class Rafage-chan. Naruto snorted at the insult, before falling silent. Makarov had warned him beforehand that the guild master's son was beginning to show a more cruel and sadistic side, and was towing the line of legality as a mage. His manic, almost desperate attempts to scour Fairy Tail for its secrets were blatantly obvious to both Makarov and Naruto too, and the blonde man was growing so wary of Ivan that he had begun some surveillance on his increasingly wayward guild member. From his secret observations of the man, Naruto was pretty certain Ivan had no love for Fairy Tail, and was as likely to hurt his guild members as he would his enemies. In spite of his feelings for Fairy Tail, he was somehow obsessed with the guild to the point of hysteria. Naruto guessed the man had more than a couple screws loose in his head, and another would probably force Makarov to excommunicate his own son. Over the years, his narcissism and arrogance had been slowly driving him apart from other guild members and even his son Laxus, whom he held no love for. It would be for the better when Makarov finally found the will to remove his son from the guild, and allow the guild to become a more cohesive family once again. Naruto even thought Laxus could benefit from not pushing his body beyond the limits just to try and please his uncaring father. The rest of the train ride was mired in uncomfortable silence, and when it was over, Naruto was glad to step out of the locomotive and bask in the midday sun. Ivan was less enthusiastic about the fine weather, and grumbled for Naruto to follow his lead. As they left Clover Town and headed into the forests, Naruto watched carefully as Ivan released several of his Shikigami paper dolls into the wilderness, hoping to find any trace of Corazon Oscuro in the area. They were rather brazen to set up shop near the town where the legal guild masters had their annual meeting, but Naruto supposed they weren't wrong to abide by the old saying of the most dangerous place is the safest place. No one would expect a dark guild to be hiding so close to Clover Town. Their trek took them rather aimlessly up an increasingly steep slope, into one of the mountains that surrounded Clover Town. Naruto avoided mentioning that Corazon Oscuro was, in fact, on the next mountain over. But he had a cover to maintain, and Ivan was the senior mage on the mission. He had recently completed a spying mission on Corazon Oscuro for the Council as Maelstrom, and reported their small numbers and weak overall strength. It was probably what prompted the mission. He didn't know why the Council would ask Fairy Tail to complete it instead of Maelstrom, but he supposed they were trying to wean their reliance on his alter ego. The Rune Knights were picking up quite a bit of slack recently, especially since they had a new commander take over. Naruto felt he should be glad for the decreasing demand for his services. It was difficult to keep up so many infiltrations. He had already dropped his identities in several dark guilds due to their minimal threat, and focused his time on council requests and Fairy Tail responsibilities. With an increasingly powerful and clever Kana to teach, Migan to guide and close Onimus with, he was swamped. It was also getting harder not to just knock some humility into the eldest of the three newcomers, Mary Jane Strauss. She was being a pain in the ass for everyone, including himself, and even the usually level-headed Urza butted heads with her regularly. He was glad her siblings Elfman and Lisana balanced out the trio. His musing had distracted him from the mission, which unfortunately was going nowhere. Ivan looked rather annoyed by his Shikigami's lack of success. Tossing a few Shikigami into the air, they fluttered about until they snared an innocent bird from its nest. They brought it back to Ivan, who turned it into another one of his Shikigami, before tearing into it viciously. Frowning at the man's cruelty, Naruto nonetheless didn't speak as Ivan seemed to have regained his vigor, and let loose a whole torrent of Shikigami, far more than what he did earlier. Sitting down on the ground roughly, the dark-haired man leaned his back against a tree as he proceeded to wait for his Shikigami to return with good news. Naruto opted to stay standing, his arms folded as he also leaned against the trunk. A look of unadulterated joy sprung up on Ivan's face after a long moment. He was an exceptionally expressive man, Naruto noted, as he received some information from his Shikigami. Standing up, Ivan gestured for Naruto to follow as they ran through the forest, in the direction of where Naruto knew Corazon Oscuro was. Soon, even to Naruto's limited sensory abilities while not in Sennin Moto, he detected a magical presence ahead of them. Ivan bounded forward, and with a shout of glee, flooded the area with thousands of Shikigami. Naruto observed as Ivan conjured a thought projection away from his real body, and directed the mage on the forest floor to attack the projection through a minor illusion. The Shikigami swirled around the mage, before they descended on him, cocooning him tightly in their papery hold. The mage had no time to scream as he was pulled down to the ground by his loss of balance, resembling a giant caterpillar cocoon with all the paper covering him. Only his nose and eyes were left exposed. His mouth was sealed to prevent him from alerting anyone else. Naruto had to applaud Ivan's skill. Naruto added an extra layer of security when chains sprung from his open palm, and wrapped around the man. More chains materialized from his back, and shot into the air. They arced in their flight, before stabbing into the ground in a circular pattern. A mildly reflective barrier flickered into existence, sealing the two Fairy Tail mages and their captive within. "My barrier will keep all noise in," Naruto said quietly. Ivan grinned as his Shikigami shifted to expose the man's mouth. "Are you from Corazon Oscuro?" "Why yes," the man stuttered, clearly frightened out of his wits. "Good, Mage-chan," Ivan smiled morbidly. His Shikigami whirled around his hand, before they coalesced to form what appeared to be a large claymore. "Now, Mage-chan, you're going to tell me everything about Corazon Oscuro, or I'll have to start chopping." I will. The Dark Guild member sobbed piteously. Please don't kill me." "Start talking then, Mage-chan." Ivan's maleficent smile widened. "It's due east from here. We each have about 20 members," the mage babbled, his emerald eyes watering. "Our guild master I is in the G Guild B building right and now." "What sort of magic does he use?" Ivan prodded the man with the sword. Though it didn't penetrate, it served its purpose of intimidating the man even further. "I don't know. He never told us. I've never seen him fight before." "I don't believe you!" Ivan roared, raising his claymore high, ready to chop down. The mage screamed in terror. It's the truth. Please believe me." Ivan ignored the man's claims as he reversed his grip, before stabbing downwards. The Shikigami parted for their brethren, allowing Ivan's paper sword to stab right into the mage's knee. The man screamed himself hoarse as the raven-haired mage twisted his blade, clearly enjoying the captured mage's hollers and tears. Ivan ripped the blade out of the prisoner, laughing joyously as the man wailed at the excruciating pain. The Fairy Tail mage raised his blade once more, ready to run it through the other leg, when a crisscross net of chains blocked his downward thrust. He glared chillingly at Naruto, who glared right back. "There's no need to torture him," Naruto glowered, having observed the situation at Corazon Oscuro personally. "He's just a grunt. Our intel told us the guild master's abilities already." "He's a Dark Guild member, Rafaga-chan," Ivan riposted coolly. "Why do you care?" "Because this isn't how Fairy Tail operates," Naruto hissed back. His hair grew prodigiously to cradle the man, pulling him away from Ivan. Ivan snarled at his partner, pulling back all of his Shikigami to swirl around him in a flurry of white. Naruto's hair caught the man, forming a makeshift stretcher and straps to hold the mage in place, lest he move around too much and injure himself further. Then, Ivan pulled back all his shikigami, a stern frown on his face. I'm the commander on this little mission, so you better don't interrupt my fun again, Rafage-chan. As Ivan stalked off in anger, Naruto retracted all his chains, leaning down to speak with the captured mage. I'm going to put you to sleep now. You might have to sit in jail for a while, but you will be fine. The mage nodded quickly, as Naruto hovered his hand above his forehead, sending the man into a dreamless slumber. Marking him with a Horatian seal to remember his location, he tied the man up with ninja wire, before running to catch up with Ivan. He did a quick check of his equipment as he moved, fingering the Horatian kunai as he brought them in and out of the storage seal on his wrist. He had a feeling they might be seeing some use later. 8888888888888888. Naruto wished he had Kurama there, so he could pretend the fox can track the mages sent to the Corazon Oscuro hideout that he knew the location of. Unfortunately, Kurama was too unmotivated to follow Naruto on non-Maelstrom missions anymore, given Naruto's penchant for easier missions as Rafaga. The fox preferred to follow Kana nowadays, and sometimes he sought Lisana for some cuddling when the former was getting antsy about Naruto's frequent disappearances. Mary Jane had been critical about Lisana consorting with pets of people from Urza's gang, but gave in eventually when Kurama once pouted at her, widening his watery eyes. Most adults swore the fox was using charm magic to attract girls. If Naruto didn't know any better, he would have thought so too. Stumbling through the forest with Ivan in the lead, they eventually came upon the guild headquarters of Corazon Oscuro. It was built in a clearing no doubt cleared for that very purpose, a small rickety shack that showed the desperate times the guild had fallen in. Ivan, still in a bad mood, didn't bother with basic recon. He walked right up to their doors, and smashed it in. Naruto followed behind cautiously, a good 5 steps away from the enraged S-class mage. There was only a smattering of the scant few members the guild possessed, but as the mage they interrogated earlier revealed, the guild master was indeed in the building. He was seated on a wooden seat facing the doors of the building, his hands clasped together in front of him. He was a graying man, with a long beard that reached his waist. Dressed in a black shirt and slacks, along with a baggy coat, he looked miserable in his ramshackle guild. His leather shoes were worn and battered, and his wrinkled face conveyed a sense of resignation. Naruto felt a small pang of pity for the guild master. His guild had been declared illegal after they took on a high-paying assassination job to settle the outstanding debts they had. Needless to say, they regretted that decision when the news leaked, and were in the slumps ever since. I see we have finally been found, the man mumbled, standing up from his creaking chair. I am Fugger, master of Corazon Oscuro. Ivan Dreyer, fairy tale. Ivan grinned, his mood getting better. We're here to demolish you, Rafaga Remolino, Naruto introduced lamely. He's mine! Ivan roared, as he dashed forward, a stream of shikigami flying ahead of him. Fugger countered by raising his palm, launching a large fireball that engulfed Ivan and his paper dolls. As the two mages did battle, that left Naruto to fight the rest of the members in the guild hall. He slowly retreated out the door as the Corazon Oscuro members walked towards him, before they shift gears and moved into full-blown sprints. Naruto sped up as well, moving backwards as he kept his eyes on them. They were as familiar with treading forest terrain as he was, and caught up with him in no time. There were 13 of them. Naruto grunted as he dodged various magic attacks, ducking behind a tree that exploded right after, sending splinters everywhere. His hair surrounding him in a shield of sharp spikes, Naruto then unleashed his chains, swiftly binding two that were too slow to escape. The chains wrapped around them tightly. Naruto swung them at their fellow mages, succeeding in distracting them from attacking him. The G-forces were too much for them to handle, as Naruto could feel them go limp in his chains. Dropping the two mages, the blonde ninja rolled away from another intense barrage that cratered where he last stood. 2 down. Hari Jizo was required once again, Naruto hiding in his cocoon of hardened hair while getting peppered by attacks. Hidden by his technique, Naruto quickly drew in a bit of ether nano. Sage chakra mixed, he quickly flagged the two closest mages that were about to enter melee range. His hair suddenly grew to enormous lengths, twirling together before forming a giant maw. The hair proceeded to scoop the two screaming mages into its mouth, before Naruto hardened his hair into its usual spikes. More screams were heard, and blood could be seen trickling out of the mass of hair. The giant hair creation opened its jaw, and released the two mages, both of them bleeding profusely from many tiny stab wounds. Naruto ensured the hair didn't penetrate too deep. They would die of blood loss if they were left alone for too long, but nothing fatal as of yet. 4 down. A mage wielding earth magic sought to encase him in a prison of earth, but Naruto slipped out of the earthen dome in time, his brief Sennin Moto over. He ducked as a knife came flashing too close to his face for comfort, and sweep-kicked the man, before blasting him aside with the blunt tips of 2 chains that sprouted from his palms. The mage released a choked shout from his lips, before his back collided with the rough bark of a tree, slumping to unconsciousness at the base of the trunk. 5 down. The earth magic mage was clearly one wily foe, as Naruto found his footing shaken by the shifting ground. A large tree nearly toppled right on top of Naruto as well, who only just managed to roll out of the way. Naruto shot more chains from his hands, sweeping them about in a large wave. The chakra constructs knocked 3 down onto the ground, but not out of the count. A sneakier one managed to get close to his left, and swiped at him with claws extending from her fingernails. She was taken aback by the chains that emerged from Naruto's spine, and her hesitation proved her downfall as she was caught in a tightening hold. A quick rabbit punch to her temple knocked her out. 6 down. One of the 3 fallen mages recovered enough to stand, but the other 2 had suffered the chains hitting their heads at high speeds. Too woozy to do much, they were quickly apprehended by chains bursting out from the soil, capturing them. Naruto extended those chains, using the mages as clubs once again. However, he was unable to move this time, given the chains had originated from his feet. The earth magic mage was first to realize the fact. Being attuned to the ground must have helped. A colossal wave of dirt and uprooted trees rose from behind Naruto, threatening to drown the blonde in the sea of soil. Naruto threw the 2 dizzy mages aside, retracting his chains just as the wave crushed him. Hair erupted from beneath the earth magic user, the giant maws clapping around the shocked mage. A hand punched out of the loose dirt, and as Naruto clambered out of his temporary prison, he was at the end of another barrage. The hair rose higher into the air, before tossing the captured mage at his compatriots. One was too slow to dodge, and was knocked unconscious by the heavy-set man. Down to 3, they launched everything they had at Naruto. The thick mass of hair that was stretching from his scalp into the ground sprouted another thick mat of hair, which protected the blonde mage once more with Hari Jizo. 10 down. Chains tore through the physical defense of hair, tunneling between strands. They caught 2 mages by the neck, and before the Dark Guild members could pull the metal away from their throats, their heads were knocked together painfully. Naruto's hair fell away as he emerged from his cocoon, twin fists catching the 2 captured men in their jaws. With 2 loud cracks, their heads lolled back, clearly unconscious from the blow. The last mage trembled as he stumbled backwards, his shaky hands held in front of him. As the large magic circle appeared in front of him, Naruto spun his body, his right leg raised. It cut through the circle, and smashed against the man's right ear, discombobulating him. The foot pressed against his face until it hit the ground, taking consciousness of the mage with it. All down. Naruto raced back to the Corazon Oscuro home, where it seemed Ivan was finishing up. The building was on fire, though Naruto hazarded it was more the guild master's fault than Ivan's. Ivan was dragging the barely conscious man by his coat, the beaten man's feet digging small furrows in the soft dirt. Throwing him against a tree, Ivan laughed maniacally as he formed his Shikigami blade once more, slashing wildly at the defeated fire magic mage. The cuts were shallow and non-life-threatening, but the behavior was unforgivable. Enough! Naruto roared hotly, slamming his shoulder against Ivan. Ivan snarled, slashing at Naruto. Belying his supposed B-class ranking, he reflexively stepped back, avoiding the slash. It took the next adrenaline-filled second for Naruto to realize he had just blown his cover. Even the Shikigami user knew Naruto shouldn't have been able to dodge the move. Ivan tightened his grip on his blade. "Who are you?" "Your guildmate," Naruto replied stonily. "Cease your attacks. Fuger's been defeated already. He's the master of a dark guild. Are you sympathizing with him?" Ivan narrowed his eyes, a murderous gleam entering his eyes. "I think I shall take you in too, Spy-chan." Everyone in the vicinity could tell Ivan had no qualms about cutting down his guild member. In fact, he was relishing the prospect of defeating Naruto. He wasn't going to listen to reason, and he certainly wouldn't let Naruto's explanation convince him. There was no other choice but to fight. Naruto steeled his heart, silently begging Makarov to forgive him. Putting his 2 hands together to form a cross shape, 3 identical Narutos appeared out of thin air. Ivan stared in shock as one of them grabbed Fuger and retreated to where the man's comrades had been defeated by Naruto, while the other 2 stood on each side of Naruto. "You have been a naughty boy, Rafaga-chan," Ivan taunted, wagging his index finger. The man threw his Shikigami sword aside, the weapon dissolving into a stream of paper dolls. He raised his open palms at the 3 Narutos, and cackled as a spiraling torrent of Shikigami tore through the open space between them. With a loud laugh, the torrent split into multiple streams, surrounding and colliding on the trio. His joy was quickly ended when an intense blaze erupted from Naruto's location, quickly burning up all of his Shikigami. Ivan scrambled aside just in time as the burning oil tore down a large conical section of the forest in front of Naruto, who looked apathetically at the collateral damage he just caused. The clones dispelled as Ivan laughed madly once more, dashing towards Naruto with a reformed Shikigami sword. Ivan slashed at him recklessly. But instead of dodging, Naruto punched in front of him. His fist slipped through the thought projection, and caught the invisible Ivan right on the chin, staggering the larger man. His projection flickered away, and he stumbled back, his footing shaky. Naruto followed up with a heavy knee to the stomach, lifting Ivan several inches off the ground. Saliva spurted from his lips, but before he could regain his breath, a spinning Naruto smashed an elbow against his jaw, knocking a few teeth loose. The blonde man grabbed his opponent's wrist as he fell, and pulled him back. Naruto crashed his knee into Ivan's side, cracking a few ribs, and slammed his foot into the back of Ivan's knee, dropping him into a half-kneel. Spinning once more, Naruto cracked a knife-hand strike against Ivan's throat, causing a choked gurgle to emanate from the mage's lips. Eyes rolled back into his head as Ivan collapsed backwards awkwardly, his right leg and left arm trapped under his own body. Naruto spat at the ground in disgust, before moving to secure Ivan. Fugger could only stare wide-eyed at the scene. 8. Makarov was reading the report from the council commending the job well done by Fairy Tail, when he heard the door of his home slam open and shut. Curious as to who would bust into his home in such a foul mood, given Laxus was out on a mission and Ivan should be just returning with Naruto from a successful mission, he walked down the stairs to greet the individual. A tied-up, gagged and boneless Ivan was held in a fireman's carry on Naruto's shoulder, standing in the middle of the Dreyer home. He shook his head in equal parts disappointment and anger as his unconscious and bound son was thrown at his feet. Naruto stood before his guild master, the blond man-looking's eyes reflecting his suppressed desire for inflicting hurt. What did Ivan do? Makarov inquired in resigned tones. He tortured a man for fun, then attacked the guild master of Corazon Oscuro when he was already defeated. Naruto sneered in disdain, kicking the fallen mage childishly. When I tried to stop him, he attacked me. Suffice to say, I fought back. He knows you are not what you seem then. Makarov sighed in exasperation. Naruto nodded curtly. I don't care about my name, my reputation. But he's got to go, for the sake of Fairy Tail. It's a guild under your command, yes, but it's also everyone's guild. There are impressionable young children joining our guild, and they shouldn't have to deal with, or work with someone like Ivan. I know, the old man sounded his age for once, as he stood up from his seat. I know. Naruto watched as Makarov kneeled down to gently snap the ninja wires that were tied around his son, his tears threatening to spill. His heart aching for his master, Naruto's own tears gathered at the edge of his eyes as he watched the aging father remove the cloth gag from his son's mouth. Makarov wiped his leaking tears with his arm. Did anyone see his actions, other than the mages he tortured? No, Naruto replied softly. Maybe excommunicating him is a bit harsh. Can you get through to him? Makarov let out a hollow laugh, shaking his head despondently. Ivan has always been greedy for power. Money, status, strength as a mage, it didn't matter, he wanted it all. When he discovered the secret of Fairy Tail, he tried so hard to get it. He even assaulted some members when searching the guild building. People brushed it off as friendly brawling, but you and I both know better. He doesn't care for anyone but himself now. You're right, he has to go. Do you need me to do anything for you? Naruto asked quietly. I can arrange for him to leave this guild proudly. No, the guild deserves to know, Makarov remarked sadly, moving around his son to pat Naruto on the arm. Thank you for not killing him. It's Fairy Tail's unofficial law, isn't it? Not to take lives, Naruto replied, his azure eyes meeting the old man's. The balding guild master grinned as he squeezed his eyes shut. Yes, it is. You deserve a good rest for your good work. I don't want to see you picking up a job anytime soon, you hear me? Sure, old man. I got my own things to do anyway. Naruto's eyes curved into happy crescents as he turned to leave. I need some time alone to grieve. I'll take care of your children for you. 8. Everybody's looking at me through rose-tinted glasses since I was a kid just cause I'm your grandson. Laxus exclaimed, his eyes narrowed in anger. Doesn't matter what the hell I do, it's always, well, he is Makarov's grandson, he is the grandson of the master of Fairy Tail. After all, I never get any proper credit for anything. You're thinking about this far too much, Makarov replied gingerly, scratching his cheek nervously. His mind unwittingly drifted over to thoughts of a certain mage he knew who avoided his deserved credit like the plague. Proper credit is a remarkably difficult thing for anybody in this world to achieve. It pisses me off enough already, without you bringing that shame upon me as well. Laxus shouted, gesturing at his grandfather angrily. Makarov sighed, tucking his hands into the sleeves of his bathrobe. Look, don't you even have any goddamn feelings? Why did you excommunicate my dad, damn it? Laxus roared, to which Makarov sighed. The guild master of Fairy Tail shut his eyes, squaring his shoulders. He was a danger to the guild. Okay, so he did a lot of stupid things. Laxus cried, his anger reaching its limit. But he's still your son, isn't he? He's still family, damn it! The balding mage stared into Laxus' eyes unwaveringly, his tone serious and final. Family or not, I cannot allow a man who endangers the lives of his comrades to be a member of this guild. Like the generation before me, I will protect this guild. That is the way of Fairy Tail. Then what are you gonna get rid of me and all? Laxus sneered, his clenched fists white. If you do, I'll just go join the guild my dad founded, and I'll take you out. Makarov's eyes widened in shock at Laxus' words. The guild he founded? Do you mean to say you know where he is right now? Ha, like you give a crap. Ain't no use pretending like you care at this point, Laxus scoffed derisively, turning his back on his grandfather. Makarov called out desperately, wait! He left the guild in possession of extremely sensitive information regarding Fairy Tail. We must find him, or the guild may be in danger. Laxus stuffed his hands into his pockets, his shoulders hunched. Says the guy who went and chased him out? Laxus! Makarov shouted, his frustrations beginning to boil over as well. I'm going to surpass you one day, not for my father, but so that I can be myself, Laxus intoned darkly, before shooting a fierce glare at Makarov. So I can be a man in my own right. The blonde teen stalked out of Makarov's room angrily, slamming the doors shut as he stormed out of the Dreyer household. Makarov clenched his fists as he struggled to hold back the anger at his son, his grandson, and himself. His knuckles popped as he shut his eyes, forcing the tears back. Then, he relaxed his fists, taking a deep breath as he regained his composure. Naruto stood before the Titan magic user, his hands in his pant pockets. His right hand pulled out a slip of paper, which he handed to Makarov. Raven Tail, Naruto murmured. The name of the guild Ivan set up. Makarov shook his head as he tucked the slip into his bathrobe. You are too efficient, Naruto. I just heard of Ivan's new guild, and here you are, presenting me the information already. No need to thank me, the ninja sighed, before pointing his thumb over his shoulder at the door. You could have taken my suggestion to let Ivan go with his head held high, you know. It was quite clear Laxus would be deeply affected by Ivan's excommunication, and my reply remains the same, Makarov huffed. Your choice. Anyway, he's not doing anything special at the moment, although he's mass recruiting mages from all the dark guilds that I dismantled as Maelstrom. He's already broken out plenty of dangerous criminals from jails to add to his forces, Naruto said. He hasn't done anything substantial yet, but from what I could glean when joining his guild, he's making preparations for an eventual war with Fairy Tail. There's talks of joining the Balam Alliance, but from my understanding of Ivan's personality, he will be too proud to do that, even if the alliance is just a non-aggression pact. And the thing that I requested you to help me with? Makarov cocked an eyebrow. Naruto nodded. I've infiltrated that guild already, and I'm working my way up. He's not the type to let the grunts know anything, given how impractical and silly that will be with hundreds of no-name mages. They are gathering mages too, though legal ones, and even did 1 or 2 relatively peaceful takeovers of other legal guilds. They have 4 subdivisions now, and he doesn't look like he's stopping soon. No concrete moves are being made yet, but he's definitely afraid of you, and won't touch Fairy Tail until he thinks he has complete control over the situation. Is he prepared for his guild to be deemed dark? Makarov asked seriously. Naruto nodded, eliciting a sigh from the elder mage. So it's going to happen no matter what. I can't help but fear for our children, Naruto. They are still too young for these conflicts. Don't worry on that front. They are growing stronger day by day, and the bonds of family will spur them further, Naruto replied pensively, gazing out the office windows into the clear skies above Magnolia town. Have faith in them. Besides, he won't make a move until he's absolutely sure he can defeat us, which means he's waiting for Gildarts to leave long and far enough not to be a threat. Given his idea of far enough is the 100-year mission which someone else is on right now, it'll be a while yet before he tries anything. Even so, Makarov trailed off. TCH, fine. I'll show off my strength there, become his elite, and be privy to all his plans. Naruto rolled his eyes. Will that make you feel more secure, old man? Makarov smiled thinly. That's your speciality, not mine. Do what you need to do. What a bothersome old man. I should never have made that offer, Naruto groused, even as he threw a cheeky grin at his guild master. He disappeared instantaneously, leaving the wizard sane to his thoughts. He pulled the slip Naruto gave him out of his pocket, a grim frown on his face. Raven Tail, huh? Ivan, how far will you fall? Chapter 6, Trouble, X780. Out in the forest that surrounded Magnolia town, 2 individuals were training hard. Actually, that would be a bit of a misnomer. One of them was putting in the hard yards and improving himself. The other was half-heartedly sparring with his far younger opponent, only taking care not to injure his protege. Suddenly, the older man faltered in his tracks, receiving a painful jab to the stomach for his momentary pause. When he didn't react for the next 10 seconds, however, it got his student worried. His eyes, usually bright and clear, were clouded over, his pupils dilating heavily. Naruto-sensei? Migan prodded the stock-still man with his staff gingerly. Are you okay? The man underwent a full-body shudder, before his misted eyes cleared. Shaking his head, he ruffled the Edo Lost Prince's hair genially. Sorry, kiddo, but it appears I'm going to have to leave a Kage Bunshin here to train you. There's something up. What happened? Migan queried, his wide eyes conveying his curiosity. Do you need any help? Naruto bit his lip, before providing the preteen a wide grin. No. It's safer that I do this alone. It involves Maelstrom anyway. Keep working on your bojutsu. I'll be back by tomorrow. Watch over the house for me, will you? I trust you more than Kana-chan to keep it secure. That girl's going to be the death of me, I swear. Migan watched with an awestruck gaze as his sensei formed an identical copy of himself, who stayed behind to train him as the original man disappeared without a whisper. He knew very well he was still a long way from matching his teacher's capabilities, and perhaps never, given how much he knew the man trained out of sight, but to be able to teleport around Fiori with such impunity was just ridiculous. He consoled himself with the thought that he was leagues ahead of other kids his age thanks to the instructions of his sensei, and that he didn't give Naruto headaches like Kana did with her imbibing. Migan knew Naruto truly regretted offering to cover 20% of the guild's drinking tab, having felt responsible for Kana's drinking habits. Now the girl more often than not stumbled to bed drunk as a skunk, even if she was improving her alcohol tolerance at mind-boggling rates. Migan reckoned Naruto would need to pick up an SS rank mission every fortnight if he continued to pay for her drinks. Migan ended up being their unofficial, and hidden, house custodian because of Kana's constant inebriated state, which he didn't mind in all honesty. He could peer at Naruto's documents in his room while he was out, extensive and garbled notes on jutsu, thick manila folders detailing information on practically every mage, legal, dark, or independent, in Fiori, and a set of naughty books that Migan found out were written by his sensei's godfather and teacher. Just because he had to shun people due to his circumstances, didn't mean he wasn't a young man. Damn it. 888888888888888. He grinned menacingly as he smashed the door to the apartment open, his mouth salivating at the murderous thoughts that raged through his mind. Stretching his hands downwards and crossing his wrists, he then swung his hands in an outward circular motion. A blast of smoke obscured him, before three people stood where one was previously. The first mage on the scene was coated in thick black makeup around his eyes and lips, with unhealthy pale skin that bordered on bone white. Long raven hair trailed to his feet, with two bangs that reached his waist framing his face. His clothes comprised spiked shoulder guards and forearm bracers, coupled with leather pants and a skull-buckled belt. He also wore flame motif greaves and black boots, while carrying a heavy metal guitar designed like a horned skull. A large tattoo of the word skeleton stretched across his pectorals. The second member of their group was just as conspicuous as his team member. Bearing the body of a large muscular man, he had the head of a brown owl instead. Two large rockets were strapped to his back, and he wore green shorts held up by a belt. He wore sneakers decorated with the same logo as his belt buckle, and on his bare calf, a flame tattoo could be seen. He also wore wristbands and armbands that had long bird feathers attached to it, akin to wings. The last of the trio was a beautiful woman, dressed in a loose white kimono. A beauty mark existed under each eye, and her bright red lipstick caught as many eyes as her light pink hair, tied into two ponytails that looped above her head before trailing to her waist. A black and red obi was wrapped around her waist. Her kimono was adorned with skull and abstract flame designs, and a decorative goat skull was pinned to her obi. A black choker was affixed to her neck, and a red nodachi held in her hand. It was this last member that first spoke, gazing fearlessly at the lone man who stood in the middle of the bare apartment. Such is the fate of those who live and die by the blade, Ikaruga remarked. That my admiration for Maelstrom must be expressed in death. The navy cloak of the man shifted slightly as he raised his head to study his three opponents. I should have known it would be the three of you. Death's Head Caucus reports to Tartaros after all. You are Trinity Raven, I presume? Ikaruga, Vidaldus Taka, and Fukuro, one of the best assassination teams available for hire. That's right, Maelstrom. Vidaldus exclaimed, swinging his hair wildly. We're here to send you to hell. The man snorted, clearly unbothered by the presence of three top-notch assassins. I'm not even here. This is a similar technique to thought projection. You think I wouldn't know when Tartaros uncovered my spy? You think he didn't inform me that one of the three most powerful dark guilds is after my life? I've been preparing for this fight for a while now. Befitting a mysterious man of myriad talents, Ikaruga murmured, bringing her sleeve to her mouth. And which auspicious location shall bear witness to our glorious battle? I will be waiting 30 miles due west of here, Maelstrom informed. The bringers of justice will arrive there shortly, Fukuro hooted. Be ready for your punishment, evildoer. 888888888888888. Naruto had expected the day to come when his espionage efforts were finally unearthed by the Dark Guilds. They didn't just survive in the world, they thrived, and that meant that the members weren't stupid. Firepower was important in asserting a guild's strength, yes, but one didn't just thrive as a criminal purely by using brawn. Naruto was pretty pleased his various infiltrations had lasted so many years. He was not the subtlest of people as a child, and his skills at espionage were more of a necessity than something he was innately good at. He never managed to gain a foothold in either Grimoire Heart or Oration Cease. One was mobile and impossible to find, while the other was too small and hard to join without raising suspicion. But Tartaros he could join quite easily, and it was no surprise that the Dark Guild was the first onto him. He had been a middling member in Tartaros, and that suited his purposes just fine. But from what he understood when his interrogator blabbed, the Dark Guild Infernum was working for Tartaros, and Naruto's demolition job had destroyed the research that Tartaros wanted to get their hands on. They had a sensor type as well, and by studying the chakra residue Maelstrom left behind at the battle, they matched it to his alter ego. Luckily, it was only a Kaiga Bunshin deputizing, and it popped before Naruto could get any more memories of mind-scarring torture. He knew they would be after him now that he proved he was capable of infiltrating even one of the most powerful dark guilds. At first, he was just a nuisance to the Balam Alliance. Attacking the small dark guilds that the Magic Council found with their vast resources was not a challenge for any powerful S-class mage. But for him to be able to reach the inside of these guilds was a recipe for disaster that even Tartaros didn't want to take chances on. He had been fully expecting Tartaros to send their top guns to destroy him, but it seemed they didn't really see his infiltration as a dent to their pride, or they would have personally intervened to regain their lost honor. From what he saw in Tartaros, they didn't seem too averse to admiring enemies and their skills. If it had been Ivan and Raven Tail, Naruto was sure he would have been paid a visit by all the members of the guild Ivan felt were necessary to humiliate Naruto in the worst way possible. He was pretty impressed with their pragmatic thinking. Sending another dark guild to do the dirty work ensured the safety of their members. It also gave the dark guilds under their command some measure of pride, to be relied upon against the greatest of threats. It fostered loyalty, and could even help breed a little competitive spirit as well. But all of those observations would be moot if he failed to survive, even if he was pretty confident of his chances against Trinity Raven. Of course, he could have led them on a merry chase around Fiori, but Naruto didn't see the point. He was easily capable of hiding from them for a long time. No one knew who he was anyway, and tracking him via his energy signature was going to be more luck than finesse. Since the dark guilds have gotten wind of his espionage, he was going to drop his infiltration gigs anyway. There was no point in doing so when the guilds would now be actively looking out for his presence. He planned on just beating the assassins after him, and sending them back with a message of peace. He was pretty sure the dark guilds would accept his olive branch, especially if Tartaros was as savvy as they seemed. Also, they'll have their eyes on the assassins to see if they were turned, which would draw their focus away from him. And obviously, there was an opportunity here too. He could use the assassins for counterintelligence, and even buy them over to his cause. Trinity Raven and their guild, Death's Head Caucus, were known for their specialization in assassinations, but that didn't mean they didn't accept money for other jobs. Naruto had saved up plenty. He could easily hire them to spy on their own, and the blonde man was confident they wouldn't have any qualms doing so too. Finally, he had the urge to fight some worthy opponents. Hiding his abilities as Rafaga meant he didn't get a challenge as a fairy tale member, and Maelstrom wasn't getting as many missions involving fighting as of late. The last big battle he had was with Ivan, and he was a pushover. Trinity Raven promised to be a decent fight, given their impeccable record at assassinations. If they were back in the elemental countries, Naruto reckoned they would be welcome at any village. That speaks so much about the lifestyle my people led, and the lifestyle I'm demanded to lead now, Naruto mused nostalgically, as he stood in the middle of a perfectly circular clearing he recently made just for that very battle. It was easy to just sink everything into the ground with Doton, Yomi Numa, and harden the earth once more with a simple fire technique. It was a travesty to nature and beauty, but the younger fairy tale members like Natsu destroyed far more through collateral damage anyway. It didn't take long for Trinity Raven to arrive at the scene, the trio landing adroitly across Naruto. Vidaldus looked excited at the upcoming battle, and Fukuro was unreadable thanks to the owl head he had. But Ikaruga had a strange expression on her face. Naruto frowned, unable to decipher her thoughts. He wished he could, but he never learned how to read women. Jiraiya told him it was a skill most men would chop their arms off to possess. Given how he never noticed Hinata's love for him until she confessed to him in battle, or be able to pick up Sakura's moods, he was inclined to agree. No one ever told him that he was just plain dense not to see their thoughts despite how transparent those two girls were with their emotions, but the point remained. Stealing his heart in preparation for possibly hurting the beautiful woman, Naruto, dressed as Maelstrom, bowed. I hope the travel here wasn't too tedious. Have you trapped the area by happenstance? Ikaruga tittered, slowly unsheathing her nodachi. Though I hope for an even fight, it would make sense to counter our might. The cloaked man shook his head. Snapping his fingers, a light blue, cylindrical barrier flickered into existence, trapping all four within the clearing. I didn't trap the area, but I felt a bit of containment might be useful. None of us can leave until I bring down the barrier, which means you'll have to defeat me to leave. No running off to grab hostages or anything underhanded like that. We are the warriors of justice, Fukuro declared. We will not stoop to your level, criminal. That's fine with me, we'll send you to hell anyway. Vidaldus laughed maniacally, getting into his head-banging routine. Prepare to die, Maelstrom. Vidaldus was first to attack, strumming his guitar. As he cackled and unleashed his magic, Naruto only stood there, completely unaffected. Baffled, Trinity Raven stared at their target, who returned their gazes unflinchingly. Then Naruto sighed. Look, it's pretty obvious this is a bad matchup. Can't you guys just quit? How in the seven hells did you avoid my rock of succubus? Vidaldus roared, strumming his guitar even more fiercely. Naruto could only shrug nonchalantly at his opponent. I saw the guitar, and guessed your magic revolves around it. I'm sure one of you has researched my magic, and know that I use wind magic. How difficult do you think it is for an S-class wind magic user to prevent sound from reaching him when he doesn't want it to? Sound uses air as a medium after all. Vidaldus gritted his teeth in anger as he shifted his guitar to his back. Swinging his extremely long hair around, he maneuvered it towards Naruto's position. The hair cracked down, smashing the ground to bits as Naruto hopped into the air, avoiding the attack. This gave Fukuro an opening, as he crouched, and unleashed his rockets, flying towards Naruto with his hand cocked back. The owlhead shouted out some gibberish about justice as he tried to punch the midair Naruto, but failed as the blonde somehow pulled reflexes most people could only dream of having, pushing against the top of Fukuro's fist, and directing the man downwards, while he somersaulted safely over the assassin. Ikaruga swung her blade, too fast to be seen by most. A wave of fire emerged from her nodachi, hurtling towards Naruto. The man raised his left palm, and seemingly absorbed the entire wave, before Ikaruga's Garuda flame emerged from his right palm, flying straight at Vidaldus. The man paled, but relaxed when Ikaruga cancelled her own Garuda flame with another blast of magical fire. Fukuro circled the clearing once, before landing beside his teammates, visibly irked by Naruto dodging his jet ho ho ho. The cloaked man landed silently back where he first stood, completely unharmed. Ikaruga's visage turned serious as she crouched slightly, slipping into a kenjutsu stance. Vidalda's support. Fukuro, fly up top and wait for an opening. The pink-haired woman flashed forwards, intent on cutting Naruto in twain. Her blade, bristling with magic, was able to cut down even the toughest of defenses. When she unleashed her full prowess, she had never failed to cut down an opponent. No one could see her swordsmanship because of how fast she was. Hence, she was thoroughly surprised when a puff of smoke heralded a huge zanbato that managed to hold off her katana. The man in the navy cloak looked completely at ease wielding the ungainly blade as he shoved Ikaruga backwards with it, showing no visible signs of strain. Ikaruga regained her vigor and started a long combination of cuts and slashes guaranteed to kill her opponents, and yet Maelstrom didn't falter, countering her every move with a blade far bulkier and less maneuverable than hers. She continued the barrage, and occupied Maelstrom as Vidaldas tried to at least disorientate their target with his guitar magic fruitlessly. Fukuro had been forced to watch helplessly, his speed and skill no match for the two combatants dancing in a deadly tango of steel. Realizing it was useless to continue, Ikaruga ended her assault, jumping back to regroup. Naruto leaned Kubikuribocho on his shoulder casually, a broad smile on his shadowed face. He had been actively improving his kenjutsu since he watched Urza practicing swordplay, and rediscovered his childish desire to look cool. He didn't regret the decision. It was exhilarating to fight against someone of Ikaruga's caliber. Only with his Senin Moto did he have the speed and reflexes to cope with her skill. That was fun, Naruto chirped. Any more skills you guys would like to demonstrate? That was Trinity Raven's cue, as they all launched their attacks. Vidalda swung his hair, and a torrent of water gushed from his locks, roaring towards Naruto. Fukuro jetted straight up, before doing a sharp turn and dived nose down at Naruto. He cocked his hand back, and gathered magic in his fist before he threw it forwards, unleashing a beam of energy. His Judgment Ho was then combined with his missile Ho Ho Ho, as he launched both rockets on his back at Naruto, the man tumbling to the ground. Ikaruga rode the waves, her nodachi raised. With a loud cry, she performed an overhead swing, firing off a massive wave of near-invisible energy that split the waves before her, making them crash into Naruto from two angles. The resulting explosion from all the attacks colliding rocked the ground violently. The three assassins backed off, carefully surveying the cloud of debris that had been thrown up by their combination. It cleared suddenly by a gust of wind, revealing their enemy to be completely unharmed. He had a spinning dome of wind surrounding his body, the sharp whistling noise produced by the technique making Trinity Raven wince. The winds died down in a snap, and Maelstrom's cloak fluttered in the light breeze that followed behind. That was good, Naruto praised the trio, clapping sincerely. I see how you gained your reputations. But now it's my turn. Naruto dashed forwards, his first target being Vidaldas. The man was too slow to react, unable to pull his guitar to parry Naruto's waist-high swing of Kubikuribocho. Ikaruga was there to save the day, needing the strength of both arms and all of her body weight to hold off Naruto's monstrous Senin Moto strength. Naruto kicked the sword magic mage in the abdomen, her body bending nearly in half from the blow as she flew backwards, taking Vidaldas along for the ride. Naruto stabbed Kubikuribocho into the ground as he ducked, his sensory abilities telling him of Fukuro's presence behind him. Naruto kicked backwards, his foot caught by a large fist that threatened to crush it with an immense grip. As Fukuro tried to break Naruto's ankle, the shinobi spun with Fukuro's twist, before blasting a jet of wind from his saws. He landed on his back, watching as Fukuro careened through the air, before regaining some form of control with his reattached rockets. Flipping to his feet, Naruto aimed a palm at the onrushing torrent of liquid Vidaldas sent his way, before aiming the other palm at Fukuro. The all-man hybrid tilted his head in confusion as Naruto acted as an intermediary, transferring all of Vidaldas' attack right at the flying assassin. Fukuro squawked as he flew around to dodge the jet of water, ended prematurely when his guitar-using teammates stopped the attack. The momentary distraction from her two partners gave Ikaruga the opening she needed, as her blade sliced Naruto's back, cutting through his cloak easily. Naruto groaned loudly as a loud pop indicated his henge coming off. The sword had drawn a thin line of blood from left shoulder to right hip, but Naruto was otherwise unharmed. He had Senin Moto to thank for that. He would have been cut into two had it not been for his sage chakra. Naruto pirouetted, and Ikaruga responded, angling her blade to slice off Naruto's hand. As her katana touched the man's gloved palm, it disappeared from the pink-haired assassin's grip, reappearing in Naruto's other hand. The blonde took advantage of her momentary astonishment, summoning Kubikuribocho to hand. He began to spin, a veritable whirlwind of death, as Ikaruga backed off, seething at the loss of her blade. Senses wide open, Naruto estimated Fukuro's position. The man was preparing a judgment ho, now that Ikaruga was not in the way. Before the self-proclaimed warrior of justice could fire off twin beams of light from both fists, he was forced to cut power to his rockets, dropping down to avoid Ikaruga's katana being flung like an arrow at him. The sword clattered against the barrier with a mighty clang, before falling to the ground. Ikaruga slid underneath the blade, catching it by the hilt. Trinity Raven regrouped once more, gathering their wits to figure out a way to defeat their adversary. Naruto, on the other hand, only sighed as he sealed Kubikuribocho back into the storage fuin on his wrist. The assassins relaxed their guards slightly at the sight. Your valor is admirable, but your defeat was inevitable, Ikaruga sighed, a tinge of disappointment and relief in her voice. Surrender is understandable, though I wish you were more able. Oh no, I'm not surrendering, Naruto shook his head. I've won. Before Ikaruga could open her mouth to question Naruto's words, the blonde disappeared from his location, instantly materializing before her face. She only felt the barest whisper of 2 fingers jabbing her neck, before she fell unconscious. The remaining 2 members of Trinity Raven had only begun to move when Naruto vanished once again, teleporting to Fukuro. The heavy-set man was harder to knock out than his team leader, but the only member of Trinity Raven with reflexes to avoid Naruto's blows was Ikaruga. There was no neck to speak of, and hence no pressure points to hit. Naruto improvised, smashing a fist into the man's stomach, before pressing his palm to the owl head. His sleep magic took over moments later, sending the man into a deep, dreamless slumber. Vidaldus trembled, taking shaky steps backwards as Naruto approached him slowly. He didn't manage to plant any Horatian seals on the rocker, as he did Ikaruga and Fukuro when he kicked them, but he didn't need his father's trademark technique against Vidaldus. He had an overwhelming advantage over the guitar magic user given his wind magic proclivities. A quick shunshin later, the man was down on the ground, joining his teammates in unconsciousness. 888888888888888. Yajima was pretty sure the council was pleased with the current state of events. He had just received an urgent missive from Maelstrom. So urgent, the man appeared before him to personally hand him the letter. He had not spoken a word to prevent identification, but Yajima cared little for that now. For Makarov to praise him as an integral part of Fairy Tail he couldn't do without. Yajima had little wish to expose the man and destroy the status quo. Bringing Maelstrom's message to the Magic Council in an emergency meeting, Yajima expressed a desire to aid the man against the assassins that were being sent after him. The rest of the council shot that idea down immediately. Maelstrom was useful but expendable, and the Rune Knights were growing from strength to strength. There was no longer a pressing need for Maelstrom's services, especially since the man himself had made dark guilds less profitable and riskier ventures. The elimination of Maelstrom would bring some fear into the hearts of citizens, given how they adored the man who did so much good. But the council hated the non-accountability of Maelstrom anyway. They were even pleased that the dark guilds would be the ones to attack Maelstrom. They didn't even have to dirty their hands and sully their reputation to imprison the man for his work as a vigilante. Maelstrom himself didn't seem too concerned about the imminent assassination attempt, which the letter described as happening right then. He was more worried about his intelligence-gathering efforts being undermined now that Tartaros discovered his deception. The Magic Council told Yajima to simply relieve Maelstrom of his current contracts to monitor the Dark Guilds. They had gathered more than enough invaluable evidence and information to launch attacks against the Dark Guilds. Although they would not risk their necks in a war they knew they could lose. Realistically, they didn't have the power to counter any of the 3 big Dark Guilds of the Balam Alliance, let alone all of them and their subsidiaries. Even using Aetherion was not a guaranteed victory. 2 of the 3 leading Dark Guilds had less than 10 core members that actually mattered, and were far more mobile than legal guilds and their fixed headquarters. It was difficult not to blurt out Maelstrom's legal guild connections to try and convince the rest of the council of the importance of preserving his life, but Yajima managed. Stowing his tongue, he decided to have faith in the man who so willingly shrouded himself literally and figuratively, all for the sake of his guild. The diminutive old man had no clue what drove Maelstrom to do all that work when he didn't need to, but he was glad for the man. Fiore had become a better place to live in by virtue of Maelstrom's presence, and many people could see the difference in their lives. Great men who were destined to help carry the weight of the world didn't die that easily. Yajima was sure of that. Hence, he left a letter detailing the council's plans for him on his desk, and left the room. It was noon when he did so. When he returned by nightfall, the letter was gone, replaced by a letter from Maelstrom expressing his gratitude towards Yajima's support. Makarov's old teammate couldn't help but smile broadly. 888888888888888. Ikaruga moaned as she awoke, her head throbbing painfully. Her eyes fluttered open, fully expecting to see herself seated in a dark, dank cell at any one of the mage prisons of Fiore. Instead, she was completely unbound, her back leaning against the rough bark of a tree. Her Nodachi sat beside her, sheathed and pristine. Flanking her were the other members of Trinity Raven, both of them still unconscious. Fukuro hooted softly just as Vidaldus had lolled to the side, the dark-haired mage snoring loudly. Ikaruga palmed her face in embarrassment. Correction, her teammates weren't unconscious, they were asleep. As she cast her gaze forwards, she could see the entire clearing they were fighting in before her. Seated in the middle of the empty circle was their target, legs crossed in the lotus position. He looked to be deep in meditation, unaware of the world around him. Looking over herself, she noticed that beyond the dirt that was smeared on her kimono from the fight, she was relatively intact. There were parts of her body that ached slightly and would bruise by morning, but there was nothing that would call for a healer's attention. Our levels of strength are as far apart as heaven and hell, she thought, her hand squeezing the sheath of her katana tightly. Indeed, he deserves the fame he garnered. You're awake, I see, Maelstrom spoke, his eyes still shut. You are not too injured, I hope? And no, the woman stuttered, startled at the man's apparent omniscience. Nothing a warrior cannot endure. Good. I was afraid of hurting you too much, the man sighed, his eyes snapping open. His hood cast a light shadow over his face, but Ikaruga could see the bright, almost glowing blue eyes that met her gaze. My master was a connoisseur of women, and he would be rather cross at me if I marred your beautiful body. I am a warrior, not a princess, the woman huffed indignantly, a light blush dusting her cheeks. The cloaked man chuckled throatily, his voice warm and inviting. Indeed you are. I shall remember our battle for a long while yet, but that does not mean you are not a beautiful young woman. I think killing one as radiant as yourself will be quite the regretful endeavor for me. A compliment born from sincerity is worth 1,000 hollow flatteries. Ikaruga smiled, inclining her head gracefully. Not so much a compliment as the truth, the wind magic mage replied easily. Withdrawing a scroll from his sleeve, he unfurled it, and shaped his hands into various symbols Ikaruga didn't recognize. A small puff of smoke covered the top of the scroll, and when it cleared, she was greeted with a low table and set of china. There seemed to be already steaming hot tea within the traditional teapot, as the man poured the liquid into 2 cups. He gestured for the kimono-clad woman to join him at the table. I am uneducated in the ways of Chato, but I do know some good tea. Please. A quick consideration of her situation told her that there was nothing to lose from accepting his tea. He wouldn't have poisoned it, not when he could have just slit their throats before they woke up. It would also be rude to refuse the offer. Nodding in assent, she made her way to the middle of the clearing, sitting in Siza across her target. She murmured a work of thanks as she sipped the tea, surprised by the richness of the flavor. While flavorsome, it was a soothing taste that caressed her taste buds, not overwhelming like some Western drinks she had the opportunity to taste. While she was not too picky about her beverages, she could appreciate a good tea. I shall cut the chase here, the man remarked, sipping his tea slowly. I wish to hire Trinity Raven. Oh? Ikaruga hummed, intrigued. Maelstrom let out a few chuckles. Is that surprising? Do you truly believe I am that sort of man that looks down upon your work? I was raised differently from the mages of this world. While I am practically a legal mage here, I am of the opinion that working in the shadows can be far more effective. I stopped killing a long time ago, but I believe you know the reason for your mission, yes? I do more than just dabble in the dirtier aspects of our world. I revel in it. To falsify your identity and fit seamlessly into one of the 3 strongest dark guilds speaks volumes of your skill, Ikaruga commented. But it tells me nothing of your inclinations or methods of accomplishing your goals, Maelstrom Dano. Perhaps, but in any case, now that Tartaros has caught wind of my activities, it will be near impossible to continue my espionage work, the hooded man said, leaning his head forwards. This is where Trinity Raven comes in. Even one of the shadows can possess honor and dignity, she spoke darkly, her eyes flashing in muted anger. Do not presume we can be swayed by the mere promise of money. Maelstrom leaned back, peals of laughter shaking his lean frame. Puzzled, Ikaruga stared as the man chortled with all the cheer of a carefree child. A true swordswoman indeed, your loyalty to your guild is unquestionable, despite the less tasteful work you do. You have been with Death's Head Caucus since its inception, yes? And your first lover is the guild master, Hattori Karasu, correct? A gleaming blade was tickling Maelstrom's chin before he could blink, the woman before him trembling with ire. Do not speak of his name so casually, Maelstrom Dano. You know nothing of our relationship, and that should remain so. But I do know of his affairs, of your neglect, of your increasing despair at the broken love, Maelstrom whispered, pressing his throat against the sword as he leaned forwards. Ikaruga looked furious, but didn't speak a word as the truth tumbled out of Maelstrom's mouth. Hate and love is such a fine line, but your loyalty to him is absolute. No matter how much you believe he should be punished for his indiscretions, no matter how much you believe you hate him, you still harbor feelings for him. That's why you won't betray him for me. And if you know me so well, why make this offer to me? Ikaruga asked, her rage evaporating like the morning dew. Why draw my ire so readily? Because I am not asking you to provide me intelligence on Death's Head Caucus. The navy-cloaked man pushed the tip of her katana aside with his finger. Your guild doesn't do anything but assassinations. There's no strategy, no ambition, no goal. I don't need to know of your activities, because they only involve men whom other men want dead. I care for a far bigger picture. No, I want to know what other dark guilds do, what they wish to do, and what they can do. Your guild is safe from my interventions. An intriguing offer, from an intriguing man, Ikaruga smiled, almost predatorily as she sheathed her blade. But even a gentleman must give guarantees. Maelstrom fell silent for a moment, before he let out another throaty chuckle. If I were any less informed, I would have been thoroughly fooled. Your acting is top-notch. How did you know I was testing you? A man of your caliber cannot possibly be as ill-informed as you pretended to be, Ikaruga giggled, hiding her lips behind her sleeve. My admiration for you has risen to another level, Maelstrom Dano. To go through such a thorough examination for a simple mission brings me great faith in your leadership. Your slaying of Hattori and his many lovers was quite the story in underground circles, Maelstrom remarked, downing the rest of his tea in one gulp. A jilted lover and her revenge is nothing to scoff at. Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned, right? Maelstrom Dano has learnt the lesson Hattori never did, the pink-haired swordswoman tittered, pouring tea for Maelstrom. A toast is in order, master. The two clinked cups, and swallowed their cooling tea in one mouthful. Smacking his lips in appreciation, Maelstrom leaned his elbows on the table as he placed his fingers in a steeple. So, shall we discuss terms of employment then? Of course, the pink-haired assassin nodded. You may continue your regular activities as Death's Head Caucus. That I have no real issues with, Maelstrom began. Perhaps you can be a bit more selective as to the type of people you assassinate, but I don't care either way. Now, all I need is information about the other dark guilds, and perhaps some of your employers. You may tell Tartaros that I will be no threat to them for now, and I know their predictions of my actions will be similar. Trinity Raven's survival will be my olive branch, one which they will take with only the mildest of suspicions. Your actions will be under scrutiny for some time, but as I said, you can continue your various missions without fear of my disapproval, Maelstrom continued. That should deflect their eyes off Death's Head Caucus easily enough. Beyond that, I cannot say what I may ask of you, but rest assured, it will pose little danger to you or your guild. In return, I can provide some measure of protection for your guild should the council turn their attentions to you. Of course, I will also provide funds for the regular operations, but the prices can be negotiated at a later date. That is a far more attractive offer than that of Tartaros, who have provided nothing but non-aggression and irregular employment, Ikaruga remarked, placing her folded arms on the table and casually leaning her bosom against them, enhancing her prodigious cleavage. We do not need the money, so in exchange, may I have the honor of knowing your true name and face, Maelstrom Dano? I suppose my offer will be declined if I do not accept? Maelstrom said teasingly, hand already clasping the edge of his hood. At Ikaruga's sly wink, he shook his head in amusement as he threw his hood back, revealing a map of striking blonde hair and deep cerulean eyes. Tugging his mask down, he unveiled a roguishly handsome face, with 3 whisker marks adorning each cheek. A disarming smile was perched on his lips as he spoke once more. You know, you are one of only 4 people to have seen my real face in this world. Uzumaki Naruto, at your service. So Maelstrom is your real name, just in a different form, Ikaruga laughed in mirth. What a mischievous and marvelous disguise you have created, Naruto-sama. I must say, however, I am astonished at your willingness to reveal your true features to me. Is there a reason for that? I hide this face from everyone in the light, for fear of their safety, Naruto smiled wistfully. But you and I, we belong in the dark. Your fate is now intertwined with mine, and your betrayal will be as good as your death, be it at the hands of others or mine. There is no pressing need to hide my looks from you. Plus, a bit of trust can go a long way for people who dabble in the dark, no? If our roles were inverted, I would be far more willing to work for you should you show me your faith in my abilities and my loyalty in this manner, even if it is a little impractical and silly. You have an understanding of my thoughts in ways that would inject much fear in me. If I were not working for you now, Ikaruga stood up, ready to leave. Thank you for the tea and the generous terms of employment. I look forward to our next meeting, Naruto-sama. Naruto stood up as well, a hand outstretched for a handshake. Ikaruga reached out as well, but instead of grasping his hand she grabbed his wrist while her other hand reached for the back of his head. Stunned, Naruto couldn't react as she placed his large, callous hand on her voluptuous chest, while her luscious red lips met his for a sensuous kiss. She let go after a moment, licking her lips as she savored the feeling of victory. She sashayed towards her sleeping teammates, making sure to sway her generous hips hypnotically as she grabbed her comrades and disappeared in a swirl of sakura petals. The blonde man groaned as he tried to wrap his mind around that farewell, his mind unwittingly replaying Makarov's jibes about his lack of a girlfriend. Does she like that? Can't be right. This is our first meeting, but why would she? Is she just teasing? But she, good lord, what I would do for some top-notch girl advice right about now. What, if Naruto has amaterasu flame in fairy tale? And thanks for watching my video till the end. If you enjoyed this content, then do consider subscribing to my channel, and leave a like if you guys need the next part. Comment down, and thanks for watching the video, and see you guys in the next video.